Being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order if I could. Could I have an acceptance of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Are there any walk-ins tonight before we start with our presentation? Not seeing any. I'll turn it over. Al and his group are going to give us an update on the solar array.
Thank you.
Located at the transfer station, the old landfill. Thanks, Al.
We've all seen the solar array as we drive by the transfer station, but 3 other deliverables that were to be provided to the town as a result of the selection of Brightfields. They're going to deliver an educational agenda to use throughout the school system. We're going to talk about that. They were going to deliver a community outreach program for keeping citizens informed of the status of the power output and what the benefits to the town are. Yes. And they were also going to deliver an informational kiosk that can be used interactively in Town Hall. So when residents come in, they can see what's going on with the solar array. I almost said turbine. So with us here tonight is Pete Pedersen, who is one of the principals of Brightfields. Ron Kelly, another principal, and been my primary contact in the course of this project. And Teresa,
Delucia.
Yep, who has been involved in developing what we're going to see here tonight, which is the educational aspects and the community outreach. They brought several other members of their team here. And I noticed that Bruce Meacham from the Energy Committee is here, as well as Adam Culbert, who's going to be involved in a field trip at the end of the month. Kind of the first taker-upper on this, so he came along to see what it's going to look like. And Bruce, are there other members of the committee here?
I don't see any at this time.
Okay, then.
What?
I'll turn it over to you folks.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Al, and thanks all of you for listening to this. Thanks for your patience during the completion of the project. We were all interested in getting it done, and we're thrilled that it is. In addition to the folks that Al introduced, you are having handed out to you the PowerPoints by Caitlin McSherry, website office, and someone doesn't have a speaking role, but is also president of our environmental business, and another partner, Mike Singer, and he is responsible for all things landfill. So if you have any questions relating to what's it all about to build on, he would be the person for that. As Al mentioned, he asked us to come down and address primarily to the educational components of the things we were doing for the town. So we have, we think, a couple of different quick presentations, after which we hope we're leaving 10 minutes or so for questions. We have a movie on the completed project and I guess the process for it. And then we've got a PowerPoint presentation, which we'll talk about again, the informational kiosk, which we will put in place here, a website generally accessible to the public, both the students and the public, and then finally the curriculum materials that we helped put together over the summer and that we're working with members of the faculty of your schools on. So with that, I was going to try to roll the movie. How are we looking there?
The movie will play. I don't know about the sound, but we'll get
Okay,
it.
all right.
Turn it up as much as you can.
It was cranked the whole way, which isn't saying much.
Turn it up to 11.
The town of Scituate will soon be home to the largest solar panel project in New England. It's being built on a site that was once just a trash dump for that town.
Just as a perspective, these were flyover shots that we took throughout the construction of the solar field, and you can see the progression.
We don't have that much undeveloped land in Massachusetts. So we've got all these landfills. Many of them have been capped. They're now brown fields, and they're being turned into so-called bright fields with solar panels.
The firm that was selected, Brightfields, has as
So
their
our
background
company has,
brownfields. They've
owns a
taken
number
over
of
landfills
throughout
in
the country.
California, North Carolina,
The two
and
things we're combining
Massachusetts.
in our business
So they're very
is
familiar dealing with
putting
state,
solar on
federal,
brownfields.
and local
And
regulations on
brownfields
managing
can be a
landfills.
landfill,
And
can be a
that's pretty
Superfund
exciting.
site. So this actually fit very well within our business plan. We refer to this as the money
Approximately how
shot.
much of our municipal and
We
school
are
power?
leaving this picture here for the town
These two
tonight.
units will supply
This was taken
all,
just a couple of
100%
weeks ago.
of the power for all of our schools,
But it shows
street
the
lights,
windmill,
town buildings,
harbor master's building
Golf course, the
from
solar
town
field,
be
and my version of
100%
heaven with the ocean.
renewable
Oh
energy
my
supply.
God, funny shot. You're supposed to sell this.
Thanks, Tony.
Glad to have me back, buddy.
Mike, how many pounds are each one of these ballast stocks? So there's 2 of those for each set of 22 panels. So it's holding it down to the landfill, but it's not penetrating the top. Kind of a neat little picture to show you how fast everybody out there was working. Pretty amazing though that entire 10 acres or so was built in a matter of 3 or 4 months, including all those pieces.
Look how light those panels are. This is that one?
So before the project could start, after the panels were all put in, they had pre-wired all of the cabling underneath the racks, and it's a plug and play. And from that point, it gets hardwired over to a combiner box. So each one of the panels is wired in series with another panel, and then another set of panels on another rack, and ultimately goes to that box there. And you'll see an inside look at that box inside. So you can see each one of the feeds from each one of the strings actually multiplies into a lot of panels, putting out about 400 volts and a couple hundred amps. So there's a fair amount of power. Don't want to open that. This is a great picture of the inverter and transformer rack. You'll see 2 of those if you go out onto the site. 2 pads with this equipment on it, and it primarily takes the DC power, converts it to AC, and then in the transformer it's transformed up to 13,800 volts. And that line leading down to the telephone lines, or the power lines, is the high voltage feed. Now was very careful throughout the whole construction to make sure that when we got to the finish line, where we had just enough power in the solar field combined with the wind to equal the net metering power for your entire town. We actually could have built out another 500 kilowatts. There's extra capacity.
A lot of strapped cities and towns are going to start looking at their town dump. Absolutely. Say, wow, that's what we could do there.
That's excellent.
So now, technology willing, we're going to try to go through a PowerPoint. We'll see if we can sum it up. If we don't, some of you have this as a duplicate of it. Yeah, this is a tired old computer.
We apologize for the technology. We were actually here at 6 o'clock tonight. We had this entire thing all working on a Macintosh computer, but something got loose. We're not quite sure what. But it seems to be working a little better on the IBM, but the Macintosh just didn't do it.
That's because we're powered by National Grid.
So, Ron, my suggestion might be to talk off this. Some folks are able to look at it. And again, what we're going to try to do here very quickly is go through the 3 component parts of what we were to supply to the town on really the information and education front. So, do you want to talk about the kiosk?
Sure. So when we were hired, one of the components of our project was to educate the town, provide an educational curriculum for the students, and to also provide the town hall kiosk. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is basically how we're going about that. And this is this book here is the educational material that has been sent to the science department. And they're in the process of reviewing it, but it's basically a curriculum that has been approved by the Massachusetts Educators Association. And it's primarily teaching the students how solar works. But we're going to get into that in a minute. I don't want to jump into that right away. We'll start with of the three things that we need to deliver, the first being an informational kiosk for the town hall. And in your PowerPoint, if you go to the third page, you'll see something that looks like this. This is a live website connected to the solar farm, which will be made available at Town Hall on a 32-inch live television feed monitor, and it will provide a scrolling look at the output of the project, what it means environmentally, and it will give some lifetime performance metrics on the project.
Can I interrupt you? If you don't mind, or do you want to wait for questions?
Right ahead.
Could that be shown over at the school? It's just going to be shown here live at Town Hall only? Is that what you said? I'm sorry.
So there's actually 3 different software programs that we have put together.
All right.
One of them is called the Mini. And that's something that's going to be used by the general public. It could be posted on your town website. You could go on right now with your iPhone and take a look at it, and it shows interesting stuff, which I have a slide on it. Kiosk information is made specifically for Town Hall because it automatically scrolls through a number of pictures and gives information that if somebody's sitting there looking at it, by the time they finish, they get a little idea about what this solar project is all about. They'll see that picture, for example. They'll see information like you see on the Mini site over there. So it's actually meant to do a lot of things. But each of the 3 sites has a specific task.
Could that not be at the schools, as Sean asked?
Oh, but we're going to have an even better one.
Oh, okay,
So,
fine.
or I shouldn't say better. What
Different.
we're going to have at the schools is one that's geared to the students.
Okay, sure.
So this is just, it's pretty basic in terms of pictures and environmental information, and shows a picture of the landfill. It shows how a landfill works, and what type of care was taken when we put this project together. If you go to the next page, you'll see a page that looks just like the whiteboard over there. And this information many of you may have already seen. This is something you can call up on your iPhone, your iPad, your computer, and it gives you real-time information. But it's fascinating in that it'll give you real-time data. It'll give you a look at the last week. It'll give you a look at the last month and the lifetime of the system. And if you look at this,
I'm sorry. No, keep going. I'm just going to.
well, if you look at this on the right-hand side of this screen, those numbers are changing every day. They reflect what the current environmental savings are to the town as a result of the solar field. And in addition to that, if you wanted to drill down a little bit more, if you had an Excel spreadsheet, you wanted to crunch some numbers, you can actually click one of the links there, and it will give you the information in tabular forms, and you can play with it if you so chose to. Although we would expect most people are just going to be interested in seeing the output of the system.
And how quick is that?
Every 15 minutes.
All right.
It's updated. And actually, this picture here that you see is a real day in the life of Scituate. We're going to show you another snapshot of what it looks like on a more cloudy day, but this shows you what the potential is of the project.
So can you see that change pretty quick if all of a sudden the sun comes out?
Yeah. Certainly within every half hour,
Yeah,
you'll
right.
see the dips and valleys. But what I found interesting from from my own perspective, and I realize this puts out 3,500 kilowatts of power. The average home at any given moment in time uses about 1.5 to 2 kilowatts. So if you think about that, I mean, that's pretty cool. If you go on this at 7:30 in the morning, this thing's already putting out 20 to 25 kilowatts. That's already powering up a half dozen or more homes. And then as it heats up during the day, it just really generates a lot of power.
No, the equivalent of that, because this isn't powering up any of our homes in town.
No, I'm just saying the equivalent.
The equivalent, okay, I just want,
Yeah.
I know that, and I think it's still great, I'm not saying, I just want people to understand that, because one of the questions we get is, hey, so we have all this, when are my rates gonna go down? Sort of deal, and we always just need to be very careful to remind people that this is saving the town and themselves a lot of money, because it's powering all the municipal and all the schools,
Right,
so.
which means ultimately their taxes are lower.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. I think that's the primary information on the mini. Yeah, actually, the mission.
So this is the mini website, so this is just a snapshot of what's going on,
Town
and
hall.
it's time sensitive, so you can go back a week or look at a month or what have you.
And so we're gonna leave that whiteboard with you, and you can probably find a good home for it. I think people will be curious. So the third piece that we needed to execute was the educational curriculum. And on the next slide, we talked about covering 4 main objectives for the teachers and students regarding solar energy. The first was the science of solar. How does it work? How does light turn a semiconductor and hit the semiconductor and create energy? And that's part of what this is. And depending on what grade level you're in, you may or may not get into that right away. The second is Brightfield Scituate Solar 1. How does that actually work? And so we go into the details of that. Third is the economics of solar. How is it that economics of solar work in New England? Just like they work in Germany or they work down south. Every area of the country, every particular geographic region has different drivers. And so we go into that. And we also talk about how do you develop a solar project? And that was a question we got really early on in the process. So those 4 components are what make up, what make up the project. And as I mentioned earlier, all of these address the multiple aspects of Massachusetts state curriculum. But the primary source of the information is websites or data centers like the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I mean, that's the cutting edge of where this technology is coming from. So when the students go on, now this is a password protected website. It's not very difficult to get the password. It's I think the teachers will have primary access to it. But it provides a lot of information, almost to the point where you could troubleshoot how the system is running. Like, for example, you have 2 different inverters. Are the inverters operating at peak efficiency? What type of weather data is being collected at the inverter, and how can you translate that into how much solar energy should be being produced? And so that type of information is that's what this website is all about, and it links into the curriculum. So with the curriculum, you can go to this website and the kids can actually do studies, and they can take raw data, they can take charts, and they can, really, there's so much information in this, I think that you could actually become quite educated into how this entire process works. And if we go to the next slide, this is, I have 2 examples of how this system could be used. Now, you mentioned a sunny day, a cloudy day. And these are real days. I mean, that's Tuesday, October 1st, and Friday, October 11th. So you can see the output of the solar project is not steady. It is affected by clouds, but even on a day like that where it's really cloudy, potentially rainy, you're still putting out anywhere from 40 to 60% of the power. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and the students will understand this when they go through the curriculum, is for any given place in North America, we can figure out on average, within a few percent, how many megawatt hours a system like Scituate is going to put out in a year. Even though we have days like this, and they're all over the map, at the end of the day, we can figure it out. I'm going to show you that in the next slide. This is a picture of the weather station. If you go up on the landfill and you look behind, I think the first inverter you come to as you drive up, if you look behind it, you'll see this funny looking weather station there. And you'll see what looks like a wind anemometer, but below it you will see some pyranometers. But there's two of them. And one of them is mounted perfectly flat, level, perpendicular to the ground, or level with the ground. And one is angled at the level of the panel. So that actually is very important, because if you go to the next slide, you will see, I'm going to take a minute and explain this. So the slide on the left is an irradiance slide. And what that does is it measures how much solar energy are we getting from the sun. But you'll see there are two lines on that graph. One of them is from the solar meter that's parallel with the planet, and the other one is the same angle as the solar panels. Can you guess which one is putting out the highest amount?
Hopefully the one level with the panels.
One level with the solar panels. And so there was some engineering that went into this system. What angle should we, mount the solar panels? And what's interesting about the curriculum when they talk about solar development is that's part of the process. How do you figure that out? And it really has to do with the economics, how dense you want the panels to be on the landfill. But you have to be careful, because if you start to put the angle too high, you'll cause a shadow, so you have to stretch out the panels. The narrow, the more horizontal you put them, the closer they can be together. But then if you do that too close, then you can't go in and do maintenance. So that just gives you an idea about those two instruments and what it means. And the one on the right, again, is kind of interesting, because it's something called insulation factor. And again, there are two lines. The insulation factor could best be described is, if you took Scituate, for example, how many equivalent full sun hours a day do you get throughout the year on average? And that number, for example, is 4.25. You get 4.25 equivalent hours of full sunlight. The two lines, the one that's higher up, is the equivalent full sun hours you get because we've got the panels angled versus flat. So these are two examples of what the kids can get into when they have this data, because you can get pretty deep. I'm at a 5,000 foot level. When you get into the weeds, it gets a little more interesting. But it's a good summary.
Ron, excuse me one second. If I could interject, just recognizing the time's going by. If there are any questions, we probably should entertain them now, and if not, Ron can proceed.
Board members, anybody? Anyone in the audience want to chime in at this point? Okay.
Well, actually, that was the end.
That was the end of it? All right. Okay. Well, I learned a little something tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Any comments, anyone? I'd like to also thank Bruce from the Renewable Energy Committee, as well as Adam. I think this is, now it's just beginning for the school department. This is wonderful. Science, economics, everything from, developing projects, just touches everything in our school system, and I think that's great. This is just the beginning.
Just a quick, Adam, do you have contact names? Do you know how to who to get in touch with. Adam teaches math at the middle school, honors programs and regular programs, and
Yeah, no, Al was great. Al took me on a little tour a couple weeks ago. He drove around, and we're doing a field trip on all the facilities, but I think the big attraction is the solar array. Will be at the transfer station across the way, the wind turbine, and the wastewater treatment plant. So I was hoping to get some contact information tonight. That's fine. We're very excited. It's going to be on the 31st of October, so we've got a couple of weeks. But this online curriculum and all this stuff in the school is going to be fabulous. Really looking forward to it.
Adam,
And
would you-
again, with the bus, is that there'll be, how many buses?
Well, it's gonna be 8 buses bringing the kids from gates down.
But the bus, the transfers, I'm sorry, at the solar array, the bus will travel through the solar array, and Brightfield was going to provide a narrator to describe what they're seeing in the course of this, and then that bus will go on to learn about recycling, where Sustainable Scituate and Mass South Shore Coalition is going to help with that. And then they're going to go to wastewater treatment, learn about that, recycling of water, et cetera, and then turbine. But he's
Just the beginning.
he's doing all the heavy lifting of this in terms of organizing 250 students, being in control and spending pretty much I guess the majority of the day on this educational field trip. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right, okay.
Excited.
Well, Rick had a
Yeah, I just have one
comment?
question. You said that we still have additional capacity for half a megawatt?
You have an area for 500 more kilowatts.
Okay, so that's just additional area. There's nothing installed there at this point. Okay, good.
But there's,
Good to know, though.
you couldn't use it commercially because you capped out your net metering.
This is a creature of the
Correct.
state incentive
Yes,
program.
no, I got that, but in terms of the square footage up there, everything else aside. Okay.
John?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. I was going to ask about getting a copy of the photograph, and I realized that you answered that question. I just think people should take a look at the photograph and begin to take a look at those areas. You see the brown field, which really is now turning into a green field for all purposes of using environmental technology and solar. In the backdrop, you see the golf course, and that was all commercial, industrial at one time, sand pits. And you can see how that's changed in the past 15, 20 years. It's beautiful. And then you get the backdrop of the ocean with the wind turbine. Again, another green initiative that this town is forged into. And this picture really captures how things have changed in the past 20, 30 years. And I think, I think it speaks volumes. So I appreciate you taking the photograph. I think something that the town should put up because it should be proud of itself for taking that step into green technology. So I just want to say thank you very much for your vigilance and continuing with the process and obviously working with us and Al and the town administrator to do it. I look forward to it. It's great to see that up there. It really is. When I go to the transfer station and begin to realize that, we're really trying to do environmental things in this town, and that's just another monument to it. So just say thank you very much. One last question I did have. I saw the concrete. Did you get that loco? The footings?
Yes.
Concrete was Situate concrete, like.
So, yeah, it's another. That's.
Fantastic, came out of there,
Yeah.
Marshfield.
Just want to say that's another good thing. I appreciate you guys to try to be as corny it is, buy local, but in essence you did. It helps a local business that, they may come out of Marshfield, but, they're business owners, and they actually are headquartered here in Scituate family, so I appreciate that.
They were great to work with in terms of just production, timing, stacking of equipment, and standing behind their product.
It's great.
Great.
Again, thank you again.
And before we just move on to the next agenda item, Al's been the lead on this. I know he couldn't have done it without the whole committee. You guys have been meeting years. But if I'm not mistaken, I think the windmill was started before Tricia, but this might be Tricia and Al's baby here on this one. So, Tricia,
She pushed
it's
me
just
into it.
because she knew you were up for the task. And like John said, very well spoken, but that's awesome. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate
Well,
it.
just want to say from our perspective also, we've developed a lot of things in a lot of places, big cities, small towns, and everything in between, coast to coast. And it's been a delight to work with Scituate. And Al and Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Right, moving on.
That's great. We should print this. That should go up. It's a great picture.
Nice job.
Sorry about that. No,
Oh, that's right. It's always, that's why you always have the backup hard
Oh, yeah.
copies,
Two
right?
backups and
Thought I saw Lisa walk in. Next agenda item is a discussion with the Community Preservation Committee. Thought I saw Lisa walk in. Are you flying solo? You have s- All right, I'm sorry.
Marla, how are you?
Scott.
Do we have a full?
All right.
Thank you.
That's pretty much all.
Let's come on up, Marla. Join the fun.
Hello, how are you? Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming out. I know there's a big game on and everyone has all kinds of commitments with kids and everything else, but, you know, we had sent a letter, you responded, and I appreciate it. I just think this could be the first of many meetings, just kind of exchanging some ideas about our ongoing projects that we'd like to accomplish and how CPC funds could help. So we have discussed it amongst ourselves, and I just interested to hear what your group and committee have had to say, so forth.
Temporarily.
And the floor's all yours.
Oh, very good. Thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure. Just a few updates from the committee thus far. We've spent the fall working on the projects that we initiated this past spring. We've had a few closings of properties, and one of the activities that I'm most interested in is that we now have, thanks to you all, the appointment of Stephen Coulter on our committee, who's also chairman of the Housing Authority now. And so this is the first time we've actually had some real connections with regard to what we can do with community housing and the Housing Authority. And he's been working very hard to get this one project there on the Driftway that we've all been talking about for a long, long time actually implemented. So we're in discussions with that. We've had a couple of meetings with some folks from the Boston, Massachusetts Housing Authority that have been very productive with regard to setting out a procedure and a method for us. And they've been very impressed with what we have so far with regard to an affordable housing trust, the Housing Authority, and available CPC funds for affordable housing. So they think that all of the pieces are in place for us to implement some really good housing for us and hopefully move towards that quota that we've been looking forward to. So that's been one of my priorities. And with regard to the discussion that you've initiated, of course we all know that CPA funds pretty stringent with regard to the rules that we follow and the categories where we can fund things, the open space recreation, the historic preservation, and the community housing. So even if we may not be able to meet precisely the need that you're looking for in one area, perhaps we can help unburden a load that you're feeling in another area and then compensate for it. So I think the discussion is a great idea.
Well, we're thinking, getting back to this letter, how Gate School, for example, how this could be a recreation component as far as historical component in that, and what your thoughts were on some of the funding going forward might be able to help offset some of those costs. Have you had that discussion with the group at all yet?
You know, not specifically yet. So first of all, just to remind you of our general protocol with the applications, we have all of our application packet right on the website, and what we ask people to do is, if you're unsure of the eligibility of a certain project, you could fill out the eligibility form for just a quick information chat. I'm assuming that's kind of what this is tonight, but if not, we can go further into detail with that. The chart that I've given you, which I'll review with you in just a moment, is really the most concise guideline that can be provided from the coalition, and it's pretty much foolproof with regard to following this methodology. So what we would suggest would be, just like the other applicants, would be to give a good shot at one of the applications with specifically answering the questions on the application with what you feel your project would involve with regard to whether it would be historic or whether it would be recreation or open space, and then we can have a discussion and go on from there. Our deadline for this season is November 1st. Easy enough to get in, an application before that time, and we can certainly start the discussion, as of today. But if you look at that allowable spending chart that I gave you, there's 2 pages. One covers all 4 categories. The second one is, again, a pretty easy to follow chart as it relates to historic projects. But if you take a look at the allowable spending chart, the 4 columns up at the top: open space, historic resources, recreational land, and community housing. Each one of those has a pretty concise description with regard to what that entails. And then on the column on the left, the definitions, you can see, if you follow the chart, that with regard to open space, can you acquire it? Yes. Acquisition, you can certainly purchase open space. Can you create it? Yes. You can buy something that's not already considered open space and create it and then label it open space. Can you preserve it? Yes, so that you can protect personal or real property from injury or destruction. That is also valid. Can you support open space? No. So, and in that case, you can't. If you take a look at what support means, that's really a category that had been created for community housing, rental assistance, management, making houses affordable. So that category wouldn't apply to open space. But rehabilitation and restoration for open space, yes, as long as it's acquired or created with CPC funds.
Sean, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, jump into it.
I mean, we all know what CPC is, and we all know the uses and what it can be spent on and not. I think what we're trying to get across is, as all of you know, as well as us, there's a lot of big-ticket items that are coming before the town in the next 3 to 5 years, or probably the next 5 years, starting in a month. And what we're trying to do is find creative ways to finance these things. And that's where we're kind of looking at CPC to see how can we work together to figure out how to fund some of these projects that are going to help the town in totality and all the people in the town. Most people that come to CPC are specific, I want a ballpark, I want a trail, I want this piece of property. And we're trying to think bigger and creatively to see how we can use those funds and those tax dollars as resources to fund these other big projects. And I think, we don't have a specific application that we want to fill out because we want to fix a bell at a school or something. It's really more conceptually and just be on the mindset of everybody that there's a lot of big money items that are coming up that we don't want to completely burden the taxpayer with overrides, and that's why we're looking at money from the energy products that we have, CPC and other type of selling assets of the town and those types of things to help fund this sort of stuff.
And what we're doing here tonight is letting you know that if, for example, could you save some funding in recreation or in historical to build it up to help make a difference? This isn't going to happen for a few years, but what would be the harm in saving it? I think that's what, I think I'm speaking for everyone, but if you disagree, let me know. And this is just the first night of getting together telling you that.
The thought process is that if we're able to maybe begin to bank away certain allocations, and the 3 categories that I can see right off the top, which I think are the only 3, are recreational, which is the creation, which you'd probably be talking about some kind of whether it's fields, whether it's equipment, like gym, recreation, the other 2 categories, rehabilitation, restoration, which would be historic, and then also recreational possibly. And the thought process is, we're looking at gates, we're looking at whether it's the ball fields in the back to try to do something there with funds, whether it happens to be the building itself. And to be honest with you, I'm a big proponent of recreating the stage, so we have another public stage to be able to use instead of just the high school for theater and for acting, as well as the building itself. As you very well know, the building's terrible. You know, we know that. So at least the main portion of the building, we need to think about how can we maybe allocate money for historical purposes. I think in the long term, whether it succeeds or doesn't, all we're asking is just bank the money away, because in 5 years, if it fails, the money's going to be there for other projects. So we just would rather see, at least I would, because I had this discussion not with you, Lisa, or Marla, I had it with John, and I think the philosophy was, if the money's there and there's an application in, our thought process is to see if it meets the requirements as through your chart, and then give it to that applicant, because that's what it's there for. And I think while that's all well and good, we now have something on the horizon that's going to be a lot more costly than smaller projects, and to see if we can maybe encourage you to think about doing that in the process. That's all.
Great, okay, so.
The downside, though, is, this is the other thing, because I want to put it out there. As you've heard, and I've heard, some people are saying CPC should be reduced or done away with. I don't want to see that. That's why I'm saying I think it would be well taken as we, together, begin to look at that bigger picture and try to see if there are other sources to be able to fund our big-ticket items in the long term before people begin to say, that's way too much money, you know, and then they start going around trying to pick off things that are truly good for us, like the CPC.
Okay, let me just separate that a little bit into
Sure.
some of the points you're making. The first point on saving or allocating funds and banking it, we can't just officially take money and set it aside for a future project, but do know that since the inception of community preservation here in Scituate, I think we're one of the few towns in Massachusetts that actually does that anyway. Some towns will actually float a bond for projects, and they're never, you know, stable, let alone actually banking money. And we do make a habit from the beginning of doing that. So we do have funds, and we use them very judiciously. So there is a pretty nice, you know, bankroll right now. There's the 10% that we put into each category every year by law, and then we have money in the general fund. And that is not used unless it's voted by the town to use it. So in effect, it is there for whatever projects that the town feels are applicable. Getting more specific onto into possibilities on buildings and some of the projects that you have. So the Gate School specifically, although at this point only parts of it have been deemed historic,
Right.
if you take a look at that qualifying historic project for CPA funding, if our local historic commission makes a determination that the Gate School has some, you know, cultural, let alone, it may not be age, but maybe there's a cultural distinction that they would deem it of historic value, then you move into yes, and then the funds could be spent on the following actions, and you see what those actions are, as long as the rehabilitation would be done under the Secretary of Interior's standards for rehabilitation. So it wouldn't just be making a modern office, you would restore it as the original building was, and then there are modern usages, as you've seen in some other towns. So those things are possible as long as we follow, you know, our structure here with regard to deeming it or parts of it of historic value. As it relates to recreation, some of the things you were talking about, CPA funds can be used to, I think their words are, enhance real property. So you can't build an indoor auditorium, mind you. They generally tend to be, you know, the open space, the recreation projects tend to be, you know, they're more of open space or outside, an amphitheater, outdoor skating rink, you know, beach enhancements, those types of things qualify. In general, building new buildings do not, although in the case of the renovations that will be done to Central Field, because the Central Field itself is an open space and recreation project, an enhancement, which is you know, a small hut with a roof where there's a picnic table, for that does qualify. So there are some fine guidelines that we can talk about as your ideas start to come to fruition, certain things that are eligible, but other things are not. So we can start to scale off some of those things. But it sounds like that there are many possibilities, and we could talk about what they are to the point where you'd have enough content in which to fill out an application, and then we could, even if you weren't intending on doing it this year, you get the application in, town votes for it, even if you don't use the money right away, you know, all those things are possibilities.
Rick?
So there's 3 or 4 subcategories that have a certain amount of dollars restricted for their use. And then there's the general fund that is not allocated, not parsed into those 3 or 4 categories, but must be used on those 3 or 4 categories. You just can't use them on anything. How much money is in that general fund right now?
I asked...
unencumbered.
Right. I think it's in the realm of 3 million, but I'm not sure. I just asked Carol for...
So in theory, just purely in theory, we understand. So the town could fill out an application for $3 million worth of historical renovations to the Gates building if this went through the historical commission and the town voted on it and all that sort of stuff.
In theory.
Yeah, okay.
So Lisa, in the application, you would want the amount included for
Yes, so the
FY15, or with an indication it would be on a multi-year basis, perhaps?
It couldn't be on a multi-year basis. We would want to know, in general, what we ask for a project is the full amount, but stages that you might go
Okay.
through, certainly, you know, 1 year.
And would one need to be done, I'm assuming would there be an app for the historical component and then one for the recreational, a separate app for the
No, it would be
It could all
one.
in? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Marla had a point.
Yeah, I just sitting here listening to you and thinking about the responsibility of the Community Preservation Commission and all of the ideas that are out there and are wonderful ideas. I'm wondering if we could have a few together and have a conversation about possibilities, and then that way you would understand what could be done, what couldn't be done. We would understand what needs there are for the future, and that way, you know, a
Even say-
plan could be
I'd say Marla
developed.
get the chair of the historical commission, Doug Smith, too.
I think there's an understanding
Recreation.
of what is eligible. We've done a lot of research in other towns.
But I mean,
clearly-
on our part too,
Yeah,
you know, about what you're thinking.
And to speak further to John's point, I mean, the Historical Commission, as Lisa noted, has already determined the original facade is historical. If the rest of the building plan goes through, the tennis courts are lost, so they'll need to be replicated. The track may be modified and need to be changed as well. So those are the types of things we're thinking, at least initially on. But mostly, I wasn't aware of the cultural piece, though, which was an interesting concept that you brought up. But clearly, you know, the main part of the building, the historical part, which we all want to preserve, is sort of motivating it, and just to sort of give you a heads up saying, you know, this is what we're thinking. So perhaps after the app goes in, that's a good idea to get together. Yeah.
Just brainstorm and see
Yeah.
what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
Tony?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, it's really trying to be on the same page in terms of what the long-term goals are and where we're trying to fund these projects. And you mentioned things about bonding, excuse my voice. You know, those are the types of things that we want to investigate. Because if we can bond something through CPC to fund a $3 or $4 or $5 million project, then those are the types of things that we do want to look into. And as you get the hundreds of applications that you get for certain things, if we're on the same page that, you know, is that a bigger priority than maybe redoing something here or something there? Just know in the back of your mind that there are big projects possibly coming down the pipeline that are way more than the $3 million that you may have banked in there. You know, that we want to get creative and say, okay, this is a resource that you know, the town as a whole wants to try and dip into, whether it's related to a school or a senior center or whatever of these big projects that we're talking about at the time being. But we don't specifically know right now that we want to put a playground on the right side of Gates for a recreational criteria. So I think that's kind of where we're.
Yeah, it's just a little too early to tell, but we just wanted to start the conversation. And, you know, we don't know where the Gates School might go, so that has a lot to do with what happens if they end up going behind the senior high school now and we lose fields, you know.
Well,
I take it.
all those pieces of information will be necessary at a certain point in order for the application to be sound. In other words, it's be very difficult for us to accept an application that was very gray with regard to exactly what you want to do where and how much it's going to cost. I mean, we have to have some pretty specific information. So that's worth having that discussion about.
So Lisa, it's not, we couldn't say to, that's all we have at this point, that's all we might have November 1st, so we couldn't put a placeholder on funds, and I'll just grab the recreation and historical, without having a project, you know, this is what we need exactly, and have all the details?
Well, you know, as a steward of our
No, I'm
Community
asking you,
Preservation
yeah.
Act, yeah, I wouldn't really be able to do that for anybody else.
Right,
To say,
okay.
here's a placeholder for $1.5 million, and I know we're gonna use it for something really, really good, I just don't know what it is yet. You know, I doubt we would be able to do that, but I do think you would be able to come up with some very good examples and some good detail, even at this point, that would serve for an application.
Lisa, just a question. Could we do an application on the historic part of it initially, and then do a secondary application maybe later?
Absolutely.
For recreation?
Absolutely.
So attack them on two separate fronts, you know?
There could be 10 applications.
That's what I'm saying. But
Yeah, and to
so we have it,
Sean's point-
we've got the historic.
To Sean's point, if they get $4 million in requests this year,
Right.
and know we're submitting $4 million next year, then we would hope that they would be mindful of that, because we can't be all things to all people. I think that's really the
That's what
beginning of
we're
the
trying to get
conversation.
across.
And the commission has done this quite effectively in the past. Several years ago, 4 years or so ago, we were interested in perhaps acquiring some land for water. And the town had had conversations with the committee and said, you know, we're going to be doing some studies that are going to take about a year or two to come to fruition, and we would respectfully request that we sort of keep our powder dry, because if those studies come out saying, you know, one thing, then we would be very interested in acquiring that land. The studies did not come out in support of enough high-quality water, so we didn't move in that pathway, so that water then became, that resources then became freed up. But your commission was very helpful to us in informally, as Tricia said, just being aware that these things were coming down the pike. And that's what we're asking for here as well. And I agree with you, Lisa, that I think we can put in a cogent enough application to get a sense of the scale of what we're talking about and start the process to see whether our vision and the town's vision, how we can best bring that to fruition and this sort of thing. I think Marty's point about the historical aspects and Tricia's point and John's about Doug Smith's commission already pointing out some of the historical things. So we could move somewhat specifically in some aspects, and Marty, you're absolutely right, in some other ways we'll come up with other stuff later. I was very informed by this, because even though I'm your liaison, I always need to get reminded of this sort of stuff. The recreational aspect really is towards the land.
But some of the,
and fields and
I have
rehab
a point
there.
about that too, because the law changed.
Yeah.
And we're thrilled that we didn't need to start from scratch with recreation,
Right.
but we can rehabilitate. So as a result, our recreation representatives have a very long list of things that they want to do in town to enhance recreation. So perhaps you need to work with the Rec Commission too.
And we are.
To make sure that the things that you're considering are on their list for us.
Exactly.
Mara's been very patient, Mara.
Oh, no, I just have a quick question, I can't remember. Lisa, is the CPC required to disperse a certain percentage or amount of funds annually?
not disperse it, we simply have to bank it in certain categories, 10% in each category.
Right, but beside that 10%, you don't have to allocate it. Okay.
See, I don't
rest
think
goes
you
into
have to spend it.
don't.
That's what I'm saying. And to your point, you have to allocate 10% to those three categories. Am I missing?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right, to be
So,
spent in the future.
for the future,
those-
which
for
is
those-
why affordable housing had $1 million at one point or whatever, because we didn't do anything. We just banked it away for a number of years. So,
So while you're thinking about that gate school, maybe there's some affordable housing in there. Just a thought.
I absolutely agree with you, believe me. I absolutely agree.
Well, I like Milo's idea about getting together on a little smaller group, quick, because I
Sure.
would like this ball to keep rolling. If
Be
there are-
involved.
All right, Rick, and if a couple of
Yeah.
members from your group, that'd
Get
be
someone
great.
from Rick.
Just give Kim a call, and
Sure.
we have Rick, and I'm sure Marty will jump in, or,
Marty, you want to do it?
you know, 2 or 3 of us.
Not 3.
2,
No, can't do 3.
all right. All set, everyone?
That's good. Thank you.
Great.
We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is anyone cold now?
Oh, perfect. No, someone's cold. Can turn off. Kim's probably freezing. Agenda item number 5 is a discussion and vote the special town meeting articles. Okay.
Good news out of Detroit. Red Sox just won.
1-0. Is that right?
1-0. 1-0.
Wow. At least close games, huh?
1-0, Mag Napoli.
What inning? One? First inning?
1-0, Mag Napoli. So
Final.
It's over.
It's over?
Yeah, it's all over.
Oh, that's right, 4 o'clock.
When we were meeting, it was...
Okay, I guess we can slow down now. Let's take our time. How's that?
I guess what we'll do is run down all of them, or we can vote each one of them individually. It really doesn't matter. It's only a dozen of them or so it's not that big of a deal.
Vickers doesn't.
I would move the Board of Selectmen vote to support Article 1
Okay.
as presented, subject to any additional changes by town council and/or the town administrator.
Do we want to talk about that at all, or no, it's just...
We should just say what they are.
Sure,
I
I
mean,
just
this-
wanted to,
all right,
I wanted to
yeah.
move it.
I'll second it, and then we have
All
discussion.
right,
That's
sure.
all.
I
I'll
have a
second
motion and a
it.
second, all right, and then for discussion, then we'll vote it.
This is the first time I've seen,
Well, you did it. I talked to Tricia about this a little while ago. I mean, everyone has done it, typically the chairman, and this year I figured I'd mix it up a little bit and ask the vice chair to stand up again and give a presentation of the
I didn't do
meeting.
too well last time.
You did fine. No, I'll be happy to do it. But an overview of where we're going, and it is a special town meeting, you know, and a lot of financial things are done at the annual town meeting, just kind of give the
This
members.
is actually on most town warrants. I was surprised when I came here it wasn't. It's an opportunity theoretically for any board or committee to report back to the meeting, but for this particular meeting, I think we want to give an overview of briefly in finances and also the facilities plan.
Great. Questions, comments? I have a motion and a second.
Already done.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Article number 2, routine...
Move to,
All right, well, yeah, it's just...
Article number 2 is written?
Okay, and a second.
Second.
All right, for discussion. It's unpaid bills. We see it typically every year. Some bills that come in,
The amount is
yeah, small amounts,
$2,143.20.
All right.
Any
Questions, comments?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 3.
Move Article 3, fiscal year 2014 budget reconciliations.
Second?
And I have a motion and a second. Article 3. Just moving some money around. Tricia, do you want to explain this? The $73,000?
Yes, and actually I was looking at the last year's warrant, and a lot of these articles were on the last year's special town meeting warrant. Veteran Services Appropriation, I think I explained, we have an appeal pending, so we need an additional appropriation for there, since it would be retroactive. Cable Studio is just a budget reconciliation from the PEG Access Fund, and the big one there, as you can see, is we've been using interim accounting services since July 1, so that's a reconciliation to replenish purchase of services, because those funds were actually for other purposes, and that's what we've been paying for our accounting consultant, and transferring it from available amounts in personal expenditures into other departments because of vacancies and timeframes and hiring date.
We have a motion and a second.
I
Any
mean,
more discussion?
the only one thing to note is that the veteran service stuff is coming from free cash.
Yes.
So the other ones are just transferring from one department to another, but this one is actually coming from free cash.
And 75% of that is reimbursable, but, yeah, so it closes to the general fund. So I think free cash is okay there.
All those in favor for Article 3?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Article 4, storm mitigation and remediation costs.
Move Article 4, 2012, 2013 storm mitigation and remediation costs.
I'll second that.
All right, a motion and a second. Some of these figures have changed. Tricia, have they slightly from what we might have in the backup?
A couple things, if I can speak to that. The article has changed. It's not changed the total amount, it's just been consolidated when town council reviewed it. So let me explain, there's two intents going on here, and there is precedent for it. At the annual town meeting, we moved out $955,500 to pay for storm costs. When all was said and done and we closed out fiscal year 13, we had spent $539,512 on cost for the storms. There were 4 storms, we coded them all. 450.
You what them all?
We code them all, so we created a separate account for
Okay.
each storm, the
Right.
Nor'easter,
Yep, yep,
Hurricane
yep,
Sandy,
gotcha.
Nemo, and Saturn. Of that 540 and change, little and change, 455,000 of it was just for Storm Nemo. So that's where the bulk of it went. Now, to compare to the December 2010 storm when we did this similar thing, that was only 165,000. So Nemo clearly really packed a wallop there. So we moved out that 950 plus, and that went into an account. What was left was closed out to free cash June 30th, and that surplus was $416,000. So that surplus should be moved back into the stabilization fund. Similarly, and again, we did this with the 2010 storm after we had resolved and costed out and paid all our bills for the storm, is the warrant takes the $539 that the storm actually cost us from free cash to put it back into stabilization. So to essentially make stabilization whole for what we took out of it, which is its very purpose anyway. So that's what I'm recommending. Obviously, the advisory committee and the board review these as well. I think this is a good process for the town to follow, since storms seem to have our coordinates, and we do have the free cash. Fortunately, we're in a position to be able to, I think, replenish it at this point.
Tony?
Yeah, I guess that's what my point was gonna be, that the stabilization fund is actually meant to pay for those things.
Yes.
We just happen to be fortunate to have the free cash to replenish the money. So, because the town's finances are run well, there's free cash available to put back into the stabilization fund for the next storm.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
No.
All those in favor for Article number 4? Aye. And
Aye.
opposed?
Just a quick note, and Tricia explained this to me before the meeting, of the 956 that we're putting back into stabilization, 400 and whatever you said, 450 or 60 of it was put in there because we didn't spend it.
Right.
So it's only
500
the
some
delta
odd.
of the two that's going back.
Thank you, Tony.
And is some of that, we're seeking to get reimbursement from FEMA on
That's
those
what I
too,
was gonna
right?
ask the feds.
We didn't
Yes,
get it.
and
So-
that's the other thing. If we get, we submitted $6 million alone in seawall repair for the storms, and there's a 25% cash match of that. So, I think capital stabilization or stabilization, we may be looking to do that cash match there.
But we're not gonna get any of that 550 back from the feds.
No.
Or small
No.
piece.
A small amount of it.
Yes,
Small
yes,
amount.
we will, small piece of it. For the roads repair at Glades, probably.
Central Ave.
Central Ave, and some administration, yes.
So would that go back into the stabilization?
No, it closes to the general fund.
So general fund, so
Yes.
that.
And that was
okay.
from the February.
Which
storm.
again makes sense to do it to free cash, because it's not earmarked. The seawall money is, because it's so much more involved. But essentially, we paid for overtime for debris removal, we paid for contractors, so we've already paid, it just closes out. It can't go back into the accountant.
But I think it's
accounts,
primarily,
because it's
though,
a different fiscal year as well, too.
it's foreshore protection, because it's not just seawalls, it's actually the
Yes, it is.
riprap and the
It's
protection.
riprap, it's revetment,
Revetment
it's
work,
all
yeah.
that, yeah.
We voted that, right?
Yep.
Article 4. Article 5 is, let's see. Now I can
Move
take-
Article 5, establishing a revolving fund for the Situate Harbor Community Building.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those, up for discussion, I'm sorry. The Harbor Community Building, otherwise known as Pier 44.
So we're basically setting up a revolving fund for the use of rentals and for paying for expenses. Are we setting actually $10,000 into
That's
that,
what I thought I
Tricia?
saw.
No, it's not an appropriation, it's just a limit of
Just
which
setting up
you
the
can
fund itself.
spend out of.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just setting up the fund.
Yep.
Quick question on the building itself. Did we set up on a meeting for Kevin to come in and give us a status on that, on the repair work on it?
I'm meeting with Kevin on tomorrow. It was supposed to be today, but we set it up and we never told him. And so we can probably give you a status, and that's on the list to find out when we can reopen that. I think the carpeting is ready to go, but I need to double check.
I just know there's events that come up.
Yeah, and what we want to get, yeah. I hear you, yeah.
Great.
Did we have a motion and a second, did we vote it?
No.
All right. All those in favor to support Article 5? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Article 6, accept a motion, please.
Move the Article 6, purchase of equipment for Widows Walk Golf Course in the amount of $62,000.
Second?
For discussion. Just some worn-out equipment, Tricia, I would assume. I know we do a lot of lease purchasing for mowers, or is it?
We've actually been behind because the retained earnings and the golf have been pretty tight the past few years. I'm happy to say it's certified hopefully at 90,000, which someone told me might be one of the higher retained earnings the golf course has had. So we're using that opportunity to buy some equipment that's should have been replaced a few years ago. And it's also, if we don't, it will drive the cost of the bid if we go out to bid again. The golf course contract is up in January and we'll be out to bid soon. Actually, we'll be talking about that at your next meeting or the meeting after.
So all the equipment belongs to the town, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yes.
All right. Okay.
So it's a new mower for $30,000, a utility vehicle for $22,000, and $10,000 for an irrigation pump.
Yes, that's what I see. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a note in here on some of the backup material about leasing the equipment may be a good option to look into. What happened with that?
Traditionally, we have leased the equipment. I'm of the opinion we should own the equipment. It's maintained better that way, and the lease arrangements are such now where we run into procurement issues because we lease the golf carts because after the lease you own something. And over the long term, there's a certain threshold I'll lease, but for these items, it makes sense for us to own them.
Okay.
Bob, I'm sorry, I didn't recognize Bob Sanderson. Any comments, questions? I would have asked you to come up, but that's all right. If you'd like to chime in, now's the time.
It's all accurate. It's just, I think that, since the tough economic period and lack of retained earnings, I think we have been lagging a little bit with our purchases. That's what IGM tells me. I wasn't really privy to it because, Rick used to kind of do all that himself and didn't really discuss it with me that much. But at any rate, they are definitely, well, I mean, no, he just,
It's his baby.
They're concerned because their expenses are going way up on making repairs to this old equipment that is beyond its useful period. And, their profits are all tied into managing their expenses. So obviously they have to cut back somewhere else to be able be profitable. So, one way or another, it's gonna catch up with us.
Just so I get it, so it's their equipment that's getting worn out, now we're gonna start buying some, Bob, is that?
No,
right?
it's our equipment, but
Okay.
they maintain it.
Okay, all right.
And,
That's part of the
so it's their
lease.
expense to
That's-
maintain it.
Yeah,
All
that's why
right,
the leasing
okay.
is, that's why we want to own it when we can.
All right, okay.
I see, all right.
Anyone else?
No, that's satisfied.
All those in favor to support Article 6?
Aye.
Aye, and opposed. Article 7. Waterways cash match for a town pier rehab project.
Move Article 7, waterway cash match for town pier rehabilitation grant for $73,100.
Have a motion and a second?
Second.
Mark is here, and he should probably come up,
Yep.
Sean, because
Mark, thanks for coming out tonight. Sitting back there, all quiet.
Good evening, Mark Addison, Harbor Master, here tonight to talk a little bit about the rehabilitation of our commercial fish pier. The pier is the primary support facility for our active year-round commercial fishing industry. It hasn't seen any major repairs in almost 30 years. It's the improvement of the piers and the correction of deficiencies at the pier is recommended in both the town's master plan and waterways management plan. So using that as sort of our mandate back in 2010, with a grant from the Seaport Advisory Council, we did an existing condition survey of the facility, which revealed several deficiencies. The amount to correct those deficiencies at the time was estimated to be about $406,000. Using that as a basis for an application, we went to the Seaport Advisory Council, who in April of 2012 granted the town a $325,000 grant, or 80% of that cost estimate. The balance of that came from Waterways retained earnings, and it was voted at the last November's town meeting. Since that time, we have hired Childs Engineering as the engineer for the project. In August, they came to us with a significant portion of the design work done and also an updated estimate of the cost. That cost estimate was $771,000, a significant increase. We think, however, that it's important and worthwhile to do all of the work now. It will prevent future disruptions to the end users, and also the cost of doing repairs will only go up in the future. Our permits are in hand. We're ready to go to bid. We've been given some support from Seaport. We're optimistic of our chances to get the balance, the additional funds, funded 80% through the state. The town's portion, again, would come from Waterways Enterprise Fund, and that would be in the amount of $73,076. We have an article on town meeting. I'm here tonight to respectfully request that the Board of Selectmen support that article.
Just so I understand this right, so I remember another town meeting, we approved a project 406. Now it's gone to 700, so our share is gonna go from 88 plus additional 73.
Correct.
For about 161
But
or
they
whatever it is.
we haven't gotten the second grant.
That's correct.
And this will be contingent on that?
Be contingent. If we don't, then we've prioritized the action items on the list.
And we'll do $406,000
We'll
worth?
do $406,000.
Rick?
So the Seaport Advisory is in October?
Yes.
Still in October? Okay, and our town meeting's in November, and they don't give an answer on the spot, but you get a very strong sense at that meeting, is that correct?
Yes, with there's a meeting prior to the Seaport meeting that's more of a vetting process. We've been invited to that, and we should have a very good indication at that time how our project's going to look for a vote.
So we'll know a lot by the November meeting. And the other question I had for you, Mark, was, is this additional costs, is that because the same items cost more than anticipated, or have additional things been discovered during the surveys, during Child's study, that have added to the cost, or some combination of both?
Some combination of both. The original evaluation was done in 2010. That evaluation is almost 4 years old.
That's 5 years old, yeah.
So that accounts for a large part of it. The existing condition survey was that. It was sort of an existing conditions. This cost estimate was the engineer's cost estimate of what it's going to cost, what this project is going to cost the town to build. So I think that they took maybe perhaps a little bit more time with their numbers. I'm confident that the number that they gave us is a good number.
Yeah.
And I think too, though, the Child's engineer did add a couple of big ticket items. One of the things that I don't believe Tibbetts which was the first engineer of record, included was resurfacing the pier and a new bituminous concrete macadam.
Yeah.
So that item alone is about $100,000. So there were a couple of pretty big ticket items in there.
Okay, great.
Marty?
No, I was just going to basically answer the question. I was going to say, so the scope of the work actually did change. There's some other things in there.
There were a few other things in there.
All right.
Just happen to think of, oh, John, go ahead.
Just, Mark, on kind of same kind of segue into a bigger question. Has there ever been a study to see whether or not we should expand the pier even further, make it larger for the commercial fishermen? I know there's going to be a lot more involvement, more cost, but I mean, would that help, business long-term at all?
When the pier was last rehabilitated, about 25, 30 years ago, the footprint was increased quite a bit. I think now that there seems to be adequate room for the operations that are going on down there. One of the things we did consider as we were planning this project is perhaps an expanded utilization of the pier, maybe not more space, but more activities. So bringing in some scientific research, maybe collaborating with the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Headquarters, which is in Scituate. Maybe looking at some more excursion boats. The Lucky Fin has been very successful in their first 3 years down in the harbor. So that sort of thing. By not expanding the footprint, we avoided going through a lengthy permitting process. It basically makes it a maintenance project, which is not only easier to regulate, but actually required by those regulatory agencies.
Mark, I just had one quick question. I just thought of it now. The $406,000 plan, if we just stayed with that basic plan, will that elevate the pier? Or are we going to remain at the same elevation?
It'll be the same elevation.
Really?
Yeah. There's been some sagging over the years.
Oh, I realize
and we
that
need to
in the
correct
center.
that, but-
Right, but the elevation of the catwalk and everything is going to remain the same?
Yes.
All right, okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Article number 8, the fire apparatus acquisition. John Murphy, Deputy Chief.
Tricia, the wording on that's going to be contingent upon grant, right?
I move Article 8, fire apparatus acquisition.
And I have a motion and a second. Second. The discussion. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, this is part of this apparatus was voted at a previous town meeting, I recall, and this is for the second half of it. And John was still not exactly sure if it's gonna be a ladder, pump, quint, is that correct? And there's a committee form that might serve, would tell us what would be the best?
Right.
All right. Can you elaborate, John? So,
Basically, a quint is a ladder truck with a pump on it. The ability to do the same thing as one of our pumpers, one of our engine trucks. So it's a multi-purpose truck that we can use. It's a little bit more involved, so you're not just using a ladder truck, you're using a pumper. So there's a lot. We're talking some of the towns that have one, some of the challenges they've had and some of the benefits they've had. It takes a little bit more precision when you get in front of a house. You want to make sure it's right there for a ladder. Once it's there, you're not moving it, but also it's going to be a pumper. So you're doing a lot of things. It requires a lot of manpower to get, to get there to a scene to make this thing function. But it can be used. It has been used successfully in Marshfield and in Hingham.
And the
Hull has one, but they don't use it as a quint. They have a quint, but they use it as a ladder truck.
I know Marblehead has one. I know the chief up there,
And
somebody
they're-
to talk to also, because they've only had one, and then they bought another one, and they've replaced it because they liked it so much.
Yeah, some towns like it. Not everybody has one. Probably it's, the majority probably have ladder trucks. But it all depends on your town, what you're trying to do. I mean, I think, my opinion, in the future, we need to go a second ambulance full-time someday, and this may enable us to do that. There's pros and cons to each one. I think it's about $125,000 more for a quint than a ladder truck to outfit, with the pumping. We'd like to go with the E1, which all our equipment is E1. And some departments actually have guys that you're always on the ladder. You know that truck inside and out. Our guys do everything, which is good. We want to keep things consistent. If it's an E1 ladder, E1 pump on it, the same as our engines.
Yep.
You're off the ambulance, you're on the quint. You know exactly what you're doing. So plus E1 is a great, I think it's the biggest bang for the buck. It's a quality apparatus, and it's a pretty good price. It's, they're out of Greenwood, is in Attleboro. So, I mean, we've had an apparatus, KME, back in '96. We had to take it to Philadelphia to get worked on. So, we, you know, everything we do now, we want to have within 50 miles. So if it has to be worked on, we can take it there in an hour. And they have a great reputation, so I think that's what we're leaning towards, is an E1, whether it's a ladder or a quint.
And they can manufacture both?
Yes, they can.
All right. Rick, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so.
I was just going to say, before I get cut off a third time, John, I value your opinion, so I'm 100% behind you. If you think a quint, I'm with you on that.
It's an option. Like I say, I think the biggest challenge we're going to have is EMS going forward, and how we best do that to get a second ambulance.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But it is an option that'll be decided by the town, the chief, the committee, and yourselves.
Thank you.
Rick?
So, John and Captain McGowan and Eric, the mechanic, and myself, we had a long discussion the other day as a little subcommittee meeting. And one of the things that I was really interested in learning about is this is a big decision, not only in terms of personnel and so on, but the lifespan of these pieces of apparatus. How old's our current ladder?
27 years old.
Okay, 27 years old, which coincidentally is the same age as the mechanic working on it. So we need to move very carefully, and this isn't something that we're just going to do now and then replace it in 4 years. So it is part of a larger conversation as well, but first and foremost is what works best for our buildings and our streets and the operation of a quint versus a ladder, because a quint as the ladder, because it's got all the pump facilities in it, you know, would go out all the time as a separate unit and all that sort of stuff. So it's a very interesting conversation. I don't think we can make a wrong decision, to be honest with you, because both of these will increase our capabilities and solidify our capabilities and improve our capabilities. It's really just sort of how it best fits into our different needs. So I don't think any of these, you know, which way we end up going. And we're still assessing different prices. We're still looking at several other avenues here. And at this point, we need this article because whichever path we go, the dollar values aren't that different when you look at it over a 20-year lifespan. So we need this money allocated now, so when we do make our decision, it's there to make the purchase without having to wait any longer.
Yeah, the dollar value, obviously, being such a small amount of money, really, it's whatever is going to be the best. Now, John, I had a question. Any advantage in the storms that we have with a ladder truck over a quint, as far as being able to get beyond flooding and different things like that?
I don't think the storms, and typically some of the storms, we end up keeping the ladder truck in unless we really need it, unless we get a fire call.
Right.
You know what I mean? We don't want that out in the salt water, especially a new one.
Right.
But also in the snow. There's some challenges in the snow with the ladder truck or a quint. So a lot
Either
of
one.
times, we'll have other apparatus replace that going out, if it's, you know, unless it's a confirmed house fire, then it will go. So typically in the storm, we tend to keep it back.
Okay.
If it is such a big piece of apparatus, a lot of times branches are coming down, wires are down, and this ladder truck loves to clip wires if they're low enough.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Plus, I think the one thing, John, you mentioned is if it affords, by having a quint, the ability to have a second ambulance going, to me, it's a no-brainer, because we don't want to have one ambulance down. We want to have them both available, because for a town this size, you know, it's imperative that we have it. And I think if that's what it comes down to, again, that's why I defer to your opinion on it. But I tell you, to me, then that's the deciding component. But.
Okay. So just so I can wrap things up, John, we're looking at $900,000 or $885 is what we have. $375 has been approved at a prior town meeting, so we're looking at $510.
$975.
So it's $975.
And then if you run short, we can do it at the special in April. You'll get a truck for $975.
Yeah, from what I understand, the cost I've obtained, and you've obtained.
I'm thinking around $1 million, yeah.
All right.
Either way.
Yeah, like I said.
So I think the $975 will get you once, and then.
What I understand, from what I'm hearing, that should be about right to get what you want to get.
Either way, yeah.
Either way.
All right. All right.
So another 600 grand.
Right.
So 400 of that would be bonded, and 200 would be out of free cash right now. And plus the 375 we have in capital stabilization, so we'd move all that out in the motion.
Okay.
Right. Questions, comments? All those in favor to
Aye.
support Article 8?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Article 9, the
Thank you,
pension
John.
assessment. Thank you, John. Pension assessment allocation. Could I have a motion, and then we can talk about it?
I'll move Article 9, fiscal year 2015, the Plymouth County retirement pension costs increase.
I have a motion and a second.
Second.
This is, we're a little flexible on this 225, as we talked about earlier, Tricia. It's either pay me now, or pay me later.
Pretty much. I mean, I think there's some flexibility, again, when the board and the advisory committee review this. We know that our pension amount's gonna go up around $362,000 over what it is right now in FY14. So if we can allocate some of that now to offset that increase, then that puts us in a better stead heading into FY15 budgeting. There's $75,000 in stabilization that we appropriated last year, but and when I was writing the warrant, I thought it might be confusing to put money into stabilization from the storm and then turn around and take money out of stabilization for pension. So what I'm recommending here is just to keep that $75,000 in stabilization and just allocate some money in FY14 out of free cash for FY15. Now, one of the challenges to this is we have to get in writing confirmation from the county that they will allow us to prepay an FY15 bill and FY14. There's some municipal finance restrictions relative to that. So semantics-wise, essentially what we'd be doing is paying more in FY14 and then have a credit going into FY15. But in speaking with our new finance director today, who just stopped by, and she's starting Monday, she said there's been some discussion at the retirement board that if we prepay, they would amortize it over the life of the funding schedule. If that's the case, then clearly we don't want to do that.
Right.
So what I'll be doing between now and town meeting is I'll be writing to the retirement board tomorrow and trying to get some written confirmation that indeed they would take it as a FY14 pension payment and then credit forward that amount for FY15. So we'd go into FY15 only having our annual assessment, which is $3 million something, plus another 100 and something on top of that, as opposed to the 362. Because if we can't do that, then it makes no sense at all, and we'll just deal with it at the annual town meeting. But again, that puts us a little behind for budgeting, and when we head into the budget season next month in December.
Isn't that gonna just postpone the hit? Because it goes up 8% a year after that, right?
It does.
So 16 is, we're gonna get walloped.
We're going to get walloped. So I would like to have some mechanism where we start to do this. So if we do have free cash at a fall town meeting, we continue even into stabilization so we can mitigate. I mean, you know, you see long-term funds do this all the time for the long haul. The town is no different, where we should smooth these allocations that we have when we have peaks in some years to help us get through the valleys when, you know, local aid is cut or the economy downturns. Health insurance and pension are two of the biggest budget numbers we have. You know, health insurance is $5 million, pensions $3 million, and we have very little control over it. But if we can at least plan for those downturns with, then maybe we should. The only caveat I have to this is that this is a recurring expense, and we don't use free cash for recurring expenses. However, to Tony's point, if we're going to get 8% on top of what our normal pension increase is, in addition to trying to fund 2% of that annual assessment into OPEB as well, then, you know, that's something that we might not be able to continue to rely on the levy limit unless we reduce costs in other operating budget line items.
I mean, we're almost creating a burden to do it every year.
Again, this is, you know, something that's totally at the discretion of the board, advisory, and town meeting. But again, you know, it's not a cost that's gonna go away, as Tony noted, with that 8% on top of it every year.
So it's a de facto operating expense, but
Right, it's not a one-time hit where
Yeah.
the next year it's gonna drop down and go up,
It's
it's
gonna
gonna go
go, yeah.
8% from that
yeah,
higher number.
it's just gonna keep going,
So
and
it's-
this is the way to do it, yet off of the,
Right, and I mean, it's gonna be interesting to
Regular
see
levy.
how towns larger than us, I mean.
I don't think they can.
Middleborough's is probably gonna be closer to 600,000 or 700,000. Marshfield's significantly more than this number.
Like 900,000.
Yeah,
900,
Yep. Marshfield.
that's interesting.
That was
depressing.
Article 9. Is there any more comments or
Now,
questions?
what do you think, let's just leave the 75,000 in stabilization? It's not in a pension stabilization, it's just in the
just
lump sum
stabilization.
stabilization.
Like we did with the fire truck, we put 375 in capital because we knew we'd have the other piece coming this year.
Maybe we can allocate that 75 to the truck. But, talk about that later.
All right, I have a motion and a second for Article 9. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Article 10, the reauthorization of some unused debt. Let's see. Musquashkett Sewer Project.
Move Article 10.
All right.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, well, for discussion? All right.
pretty straightforward. This is just a, removing articles that were, removing dollar values that were already authorized but unspent because projects are finished and came in under budget and so on and so forth, so it takes it off of our debt, therefore lowering the amount we owe and therefore helping our ability to get better bond ratings and so
And I
on.
think a couple of things were taken off.
The
so-
Marine Park one for 280's come off,
Yep.
and then the Musquashkett and the Wampatuck School ones stay on. And thanks to Pam, who's here, T-minus 2 hours to her vacation, who worked really hard on getting this.
No, it's coming off. That's coming off.
Yeah, we're not gonna rescind it.
Right.
Yeah, that 280 is, we still have salt marsh mitigation over there with the Corps, so Mark still needs that money.
Okay.
Project that will not go away.
We have,
We have voted?
yes, please. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Article number 11.
Move Article 11, Water Pipe Improvement and Replacement Project.
And a second.
Second.
Okay. As everyone knows, this is the groundwater article.
So, when I was at advisory committee last Thursday, I think it was Maura, and a really good question was, good for them to put in their report what each $1 million of water work costs, and, you know, how much it's gonna cost on the rate. So Al did this workup for folks to show what the attendant cost would be for, since we anticipate we'd be letting between 5 and 7 million, I think, roughly each year for the next 2 to 3 to 4 years, depending on how the improvements were going. And then, therefore, what does it mean for the water rate users in terms of their water bills? So, and on the back, he did some amortization on some borrowing, but I think it's informational as a frame of reference, although the amounts are very, very low, but to show it incrementally, I think is.
So to do the whole project, $22 million, the added cost per household is $215 on average, correct?
$215 per year.
Yes, right, which is a 66% increase.
Right.
Sorry?
The average now is 319, this says.
Okay,
So,
I'm looking
yeah.
at the back side, and I just
Right, so-
ran the bottom, right?
319.
No, it would be 215 a year, so it'd be,
An additional,
so basically, if you're doing 7 million a year, it's 68 per household,
Yeah, the 7 million, but if it was for the 20.
but you're doing it over a period of years,
Right,
which is,
so it's
adds
got
up.
a pyramid.
There's 3 of them, right?
So this is definitely being funded through the water rates, so.
well, Karen Conley and I were talking about that today, and I said, well, we had some discussion about it, how to fund it. I think we all
We never
agreed.
really voted on that.
No, we didn't. We kind of sat it around,
Right.
you know, and what would be the fairest way, and, you know, I'm not an accountant, but apparently if we did it through the water rates, the only downside is you can't take it off your taxes. Tony?
Right.
Thanks.
It's the only downside.
And the other thing, it's a lot like
$68
pay
a
as you go, you know, so the people that use more, pay more. People that conserve, don't. But I think it's something that, you know, I'm very excited that we're moving this forward as fast on this as we are. Comments, questions?
I think the backup material here is very important for people to understand that this would be a phased approach. And as it says, if there's a substantial improvement after only 1 or 2 years of work, then, you know, it slows down, but we're really committing to solving the problem here, at least from this angle. So it's not like we're gonna do $22 million of work next year, because we physically can't do that. But this sets up a system by which we can expand and solve the problems as we're continuing on the work. And I think it also sends a very loud signal to the town that we're committed to doing everything we can to solving this problem.
I just say we just complete it. I don't say we slow down. I think
No, I know.
at that rate, we just get it to the end and get it done.
Well, it's a 3-year project thereabouts to do it
Correct.
all at once. It's about as aggressive, I think, as we could get. from
But I think
what
the spirit of it
was
being that, you know, there might be some reasons why we might want to either speed up or slow down, but it's important for people to understand we're not doing $22 million by next August.
Correct. It'll be over a little over 3
Bunch
years.
of
it
years,
looks
but this
like.
is the commitment
And
that we're.
the engineers are gonna tell us what area we can get the, you know, the most, biggest bang for our buck, and get the, you know, most residents have cleaner water, the fastest time. Right.
Well, I think it's important to know that we're not spending it, we're just authorizing it.
Yep.
And it's, you know, I'm not convinced we have to replace every single pipe in town. So that's what the engineers are looking at now. They may say, if you solve this $5 million pipe area, it's gonna solve 90% of your problems, and then the rest of it can be more on a maintenance. I don't know.
Right.
But that's what we're hoping to find out. You know, obviously, we wanna attack it as aggressively as possible, but we don't wanna, we don't wanna spend $22 million if we don't have to.
Well, yeah, and frankly,
Fair
if
point.
it comes out and it's $15 million too, then at the next town meeting, I want to rescind that other $7 million, because again, when
it
we
off.
go to bond for gates and whatever else is coming down the pike, I don't want $7 million unissued, unauthorized. So we have an opportunity, I think, once we get that engineering study, to pull it back right away once we get a better number.
Think we'll know that quick?
All in, yeah, I think January. I mean, certainly for the annual town meeting.
Really?
Well, is that gonna impact, I mean, we're authorizing aggressively 3 years' worth of projects at a very high number that we don't even know if it's gonna be in. Is it gonna impact the other stuff that's more imminent? I mean, we've already put $1 million into the new middle school. Is authorizing $22 million for water instead of, let's say, 7 for year 1.
But again, it's authorizing, not doing it.
No, but she just said the authorization has an impact.
On our borrowing?
But
Does
I'm
it?
saying we'll know that number by the annual town meeting, and right now, that number short of that report is $22 million. I mean, I support authorizing the entire amount, because we have an opportunity when we get the real data to amend it at a later point. But I think in order for the large-scale contracting and purchasing of equipment and materials so we can hit the ground running in March is important to have that authorization.
And I just think we have to be prepared to spend the $22 million. We know, I mean, Al's given us information about how old, how many miles of pipe there are. So it's not like we don't know that the engineer's gonna tell us that we have, you know, a few miles of pipe that's only 10 years old.
Correct.
We know we don't.
Right.
You know, in the, you know, we have samples and we have pictures of it to see what that looks like. So I agree with you. It'd be nice if we don't have to spend 22 million, but I think we have to be prepared to.
And trying to understand how the water system works is very interesting, because depending on how the flow comes from different directions, the gates switch off. So if you've got an area of piping that we decide, okay, it's okay for now, what's gonna end up happening is in the next 12 or 18 months, you're gonna have people that are affected by that area. So, knowing the age of the pipes, I don't have a positive look at saying, oh, okay, there's gonna be some pipes we're not gonna replace. I don't see that happening. It'd be nice, but I just don't see it.
I agree.
You know, I think it's all gonna have to be done. You know, there isn't any that are any, you know, obviously some that have been replaced recently, so.
Mara?
Does it make sense for you to determine how those rates will, like how the citizens will be impacted and will pay back even that initial $7 million?
We have, right?
You have?
It's gonna go up 3% per
So
$1 million
is
we
this
spend.
Is this what you're going to do? Okay. So
Yeah.
that's how you're
Well, we
going
haven't actually voted that we're gonna do it in the rates,
That's
but,
my point.
but if we do it in the rates, it's gonna go up 3% for every $1 million of work we do, right?
Okay, and that was just my point. to
3%
understand
of
how
the
you-
current measured value, not 3% of, so the next 3% would be a dollar value based on this original amount, not
Right.
3%
Not
of the new
incremental.
plus the 3%.
Yeah, it's gonna,
Yeah.
Not
And the $7
compounded.
million is going to be 21% rate increase,
Right.
Right, which is about
If I read this
$68,
correctly.
right,
$68,
which is why it's good
right?
to do, no, on the $1 million basis, because it could be 5, it could be 7,
Right.
could be 4.
But at 22 million, it's gonna go up 66%. It's a lot.
Oh, yeah, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just,
Oh, no,
I think
I-
our citizens want to know.
Well, I think we're voting it's gonna come out of the rates, aren't we?
I don't think
We're
we're
not
making that
voting
vote
it
now.
tonight, no.
I mean, the other thing you have to remember is we already have the rates going up 10% a year for just the other stuff.
5, I thought it was, well, I don't know, you
No,
could be,
it's
I can't,
actually, it's
is it 10?
15, didn't we?
Is it-
They
I
wanted
can't
a
remember.
33.
It was
No,
5, then you
went up to
increased
7 or
it to
10.
10 last
Yeah.
year. But remember, that's funding the debt service now on the 6
the old-
miles that have been replaced already.
So you've got, you've got that in, the rates are already going up 10% to fund the old debt. Now they're at 3% on top of that, so.
This
Yeah,
also
so-
assumes a 5% interest rate, which hopefully will get much less.
So I have a question.
I think it's safe to say where we used to be at the low rates, like I know we've all seen those charts where Scituate was way low on
We're still very
the
low.
average use. We're gonna be up in the
We'll be up there,
upper
yeah.
middle average of the stuff now.
We'll
So-
be middle average, we won't still be in the high side.
No.
The decision to raise the rate or to do a debt exclusion override is not being made tonight, correct?
No.
That's
Okay.
correct,
And that
although,
decision's gonna be made at some point after we get the report from the engineers in January, correct? Is that
I
my
would think so.
understanding?
Yeah, when we know how much it's gonna cost.
And the reason why I'm asking that is to Moore's point, which I think is a valid point, because I'm not convinced either way yet. I'd really like to know, before we make the decision, the difference between a debt exclusion override percentage with tax benefits to taxpayers for property owners versus increasing the rate by consumer, by usage, like we have here, because I need to know both sides of this before I actually weigh in and saying one way's better than the other, because if you have a big family and you're low income, it's gonna be a huge hit to that family. Although, they're gonna have to conserve, I get it. If you're a property owner, you rent property, then you know what? They're just passing it on to their tenants, so I need to know a little bit here about both sides of the equation before I make a decision, but we're not making that decision tonight.
But also, John, I don't know if it was you, somebody brought up, you can
Fixed.
have a fixed cost.
Fixed rate, we could fix
And,
it.
I mean, there were a lot of different,
That's what I mean, I think we need to
Possibilities.
see that, because this is a
of
big
course, if the
decision.
override fails, then you don't have an appropriate, an
plus it
authorized,
takes
yeah.
a lot more time. I think the reason we're doing this is so we can
We have to get
start
it done.
up like that.
I got it.
You do an override, it's gonna be another 6 months of,
No, we won't, and we wouldn't be ready even, but for March or April,
What?
Still would like to see the numbers, though.
if we had to go for the override. And if,
I think you should have the discussion soon, because if the board is of the opinion it should be a debt exclusion, then there's an opportunity to put it on the December 14th ballot.
But I think John's point is
I
how
think
can we
it's-
make that decision without knowing what the number is?
Yeah,
That's
well, we
right.
can have that for the next meeting. Well, yeah, that's true, too.
I'd just like to see the numbers.
You want
It
the
doesn't
Weston and
sound like
Sampson number?
I'm going to
No,
persuade anybody. I just
right, no, you're
think
right.
for us to see it, we should at least know it, so that when we address it with other people, they're going to understand that. That's all.
No, I just want to make sure now we've opened up.
No,
the-
I understand
We're
what
not
you're
going to have the
saying.
Weston and Sampson number by December.
No, we won't have the firm number.
Right. So, but by keeping this open as to actually how we're going to fund it, one of the options could be through the water rates, which we, acting in our ability as water commissioners, can do at the stroke of a pen.
yep, that's right.
Whereas if we choose to do the debt exclusion, that would require obviously town meeting and all that sort of stuff.
So maybe the first phase you decide to do that. and leave it open for phase 2 and 3.
Because you could reduce the rate later, and
I agree. I just want to know the
gotta
numbers.
know.
I just want to be drive down this road and say, that for purposes of expedient, let's just hit the ground running, let's increase the rates. I'd like to know what the benefit would be the other way, just so that,
Yeah, the article allows for
Yeah.
that flexibility, so, that's a good point.
So we need to change this backup material because it clearly says it's gonna be through the rates.
Well, it's your backup material, so.
Yeah, no, I know, but in the sense of, yeah, I know, but in the sense of,
Here, you see.
why don't we talk about it at the next meeting?
Right.
talking
perfect.
about.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Ian?
Yes, Ann Burbine, Pancras Road. I had mentioned this when you were discussing raising the water rates at that last meeting, whenever that was. Rather than raising the rates, what if you raise the minimum?
Right.
That's what we just talked
Yeah,
about.
that's what we said, have it a
Exactly
fixed.
So, yes, so that, well,
Right.
we need to be a little bit clearer than that, so that if the fixed rate, I mean, for me, for it to go up 10% for somebody that's a single head of household, it's not much. And it doesn't seem fair if it's all on the rates, as someone had pointed out, you have a very large family. If the rate went up to, as I said at the last meeting, $100 a quarter, it's still a lower base price than
Right.
anybody else on the South Shore.
Right. That's one of the options within the nest of
The
options
parameters.
that's talked about when we say rates.
Right.
There's different ways of skinning that rate cap.
Right, I think we have to put together what it would look like in an override in terms of the town's overall debt schedule with a $60 or $70 million middle school coming along as well. But you're right, to John's point, I don't think we've presented any facts and figures on what the override piece would look, and that's my error, because my sense after the retreat was you were moving
Rates.
towards the rates, so that's why I put it in
I
that.
think I think we lean that way. It'd also be good to see where we compare to our neighboring towns like we've looked at in the past after this project's done.
We'll have brand new
You
pipes.
can look, but, I wouldn't put a lot of stock into what the other towns charge. I have property in Cohasset, and I pay a lot of money, and I don't have don't turn the water on, so. All right. Do I have a motion and a second? Can we vote on Article 11?
Yes.
Moved. All right, I have a
Second.
motion, I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Article 11.
Aye.
And we will be discussing it at another meeting on how we will fund it. Article number 12.
Move Article 12, Scituate Library Renovation and Expansion Grant Project.
I have a
Second.
motion, I have a second, okay, for discussion. Okay, we've talked about this before. I had a conversation with Karen Conley today about it, once again.
Burning up the phone lines, huh?
Yes, I was a busy person today. I honestly forget how we voted about it before. It's a great project. I think we've all tossed around the idea of supporting it, not supporting it, turning down $5 million. It's like we just talked about, we voted the town pier. Seaport Advisory Committee's giving us 80% of a project. It's pretty hard to say no to stuff like that.
I think our last discussion was, it's our job to present all the upcoming projects in the next 3, 4, 5 years to the town, so that they're aware of what's gonna be on the table before they start spending their money. And then they can decide which ones they think are the most beneficial to them, or which ones they can afford, which ones they can't afford. And that was our goal for the upcoming special town meeting, to say, here's what we're thinking about, here's what the cost for each one is, and I don't think any of us think it's a bad project.
Right.
It's just one of many right now.
Okay. Any other comments, questions on that article? Karen?
I've already said it.
I know, all right.
Did you talk to everyone?
So it's
Talk to
12
me.
million.
Appreciate the board's support, the library proponents do. And Merle is more of an official, I'm more of an interested citizen, so maybe she'd like to.
No, I just want to thank you for your support, and we made our presentation in August.
Right.
We're working really hard to inform the citizenry of the project, and hopefully it will pass at town meeting and ballot, and then at that point, We're gonna go full boat for raising as much private funds as we possibly can to defray the cost to the town. And I think once the townspeople realize that the project's a go, I think that at that point, we will be able to raise as much, if not more, than we had hoped. So, but it's a good project. I would hate to turn down $5 million from the state for the library renovation expansion. And I just was curious about the warrant, the new library, because if it does, that probably should be corrected because of the renovation extension.
It didn't say a new library.
This wasn't, okay.
Doesn't it?
Design
A new library.
Because it's
Right.
really not a new public library, it's a renovated, expanded library. So I would hate any citizens to misunderstand what the project is.
Yep, I agree.
Right. So it's 12 million, 5 from the state, X amount from private fundraising, and we're authorizing, or we're putting on the warrant and the ballot, the town to cover the balance.
No, that's incorrect.
Covering it all.
Right, but
That's incorrect.
town has to cover the 12.
The town meeting needs to authorize the full 12 million.
Correct, but when all's said and done downstream, the intent is 12 minus 5 minus private.
That's really 12, 7 from the town, offset by 2, and or as much as we possibly can raise.
Right.
200,000?
2 million.
Well, they've raised 600,
600.
and hopefully, once the project passes, there's evidence that people actually come out and start to give more money.
We have some big donors waiting in the wings.
To the tune of 1.4.
So, but I just want to understand, regardless of the figures, dollar values, and regardless of if you don't raise any more money, or regardless if you raise another 5 million, this is generally what we're talking about.
The town would be on the hook for 7, minus whatever we can raise to offset that.
Well, I definitely support this project, as I said. I definitely support this project, as I said, both publicly and privately. And I'm also looking forward to the people who are in support of the library also working very hard to support many other aspects of the town improvements we're doing in the future years. And I know I can count on you guys for your support on those endeavors as well.
Oh, yes.
We've been out talking to the schools.
No, I know. That's why I'm saying it. I'm giving you guys the
There are
public,
other projects that we're-
I'm giving you guys the public acknowledgement you deserve.
I missed something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this town is,
We need to run campaigns.
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
town really has a lot of infrastructure needs that have been put off for many, many years, and now the time has come to address them.
Yep, absolutely right.
Okay. We have a motion, right? We have a second.
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Article 13 is the petition article, the extension of the Village Overlay Zoning District.
Yeah, you're fine. No, you're fine. Yeah, no worries.
Hi, Adam, how are you? If you guys don't mind identifying yourselves for the record.
And Laura,
Thank you.
Laura, come up.
Yes, Laura, I'm sorry. It's getting late. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Adam Brodsky. I'm a lawyer. I live in Scituate. My office is in Hingham. I'm here with Paul Donovan, who's one of the owners of South Shore Auto Parts, and of course, you know Laura Harbottle, the town planner. We're asking town meeting to change the zoning map to extend the Village Business Overlay District in the Greenbush section of Scituate to the south side of New Driftway. The zoning map change would affect 8 parcels, 2 of which belong to South Shore Auto. The district is zoned commercial. In fact, I do have copies, if you'd like color copies, of the petition and the zoning map change, if that's at all helpful.
Do you have a map? I think we have all
I
that
have the
stuff.
petition already. The map would be great.
That'd be
We have the
great.
parcel IDs, Adam.
Map would be great.
Excellent.
Thanks. And one extra, please.
If you don't have enough, I'll look over
we
with,
have all-
I can look over.
we have
I can, yes, we can share one. Tony,
Sorry, I thought he was going to be giving everybody a copy. Can you give one to John?
I don't know if you have,
Happy to give one.
if you got an extra one, Adam, that's fine. Thanks.
You guys can,
Thanks.
You're on.
Thank you.
The district is presently zoned commercial, and the intent of the map change is not to change the underlying zoning, it will remain commercial, but simply to extend the overlay district that now exists on the other side of Greenbush to this portion, which will facilitate actually mixed use in this portion, subject, of course, to a special permit process. Conceptually, what this would allow you to do is have, for example, retail on the first floor of a building with residential on the second floor. And the intent of the
Can I
bylaw.
interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
Can you just look at the map and tell us what we're looking at?
Sure,
Just
of
so-
course.
The pink cross
So-
marks, right? That's where
Correct.
it's-
So the pink is the commercial district. And the parcels that would be affected by the bylaw change are these crossed hatch parcels.
And is
So-
that where's the auto store right now? Right here
Right
somewhere?
next to, there are two parcels here. The parcel to the east, which is the medical office building, the parcel behind, the Rousseau parcels behind, Mr. Drew's property that's across that way towards the rear, the Dunkin' Donuts, and then the small strip mall or shopping center.
So this proposal is to change all of those areas you
Correct.
just mentioned?
Adam,
Okay.
all 8 parcels.
How far to the east does this crosshatch go?
It's these little crosshatch right here.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
Not these big blue
No,
lines
that's,
screaming through
that's
there.
that's your Conservancy district.
Yeah, I was wondering what the heck is going on.
No, just the little tiny crosshatches.
That's Russ. The fire was right here.
That's Topman's place.
So the intent of the bylaw was to create village settings, both downtown, North Situate, and Greenbush. And it was part of the town's smart growth initiative. Unfortunately, in the Greenbush section, we haven't had much success in creating that type of village environment. So we think we've got a better location to do this, which is on the south side of the Driftway. We're actually closer to Greenbush. You could theoretically just walk across New Driftway to get to the rail line. And this portion of town is actually interesting, one of the gateways into Scituate. So imagine coming off of the Rotary, you see a medical building on the right, medical building on the left. We now have a restaurant, which is great, small mall, Dunkin' Donuts, and then there's essentially nothing to the south until you get to the medical building. So and again, we're not proposing any project here, but we have a really great opportunity to conceptually create a village as was intended. And so we did ask a designer to just use her imagination. Thank you, copies of this. So we just wanted to ask the designer to imagine what you could do with the South Shore Auto parcel. So this is what you're looking at existing, and I've got smaller copies if you'd like to see them.
Yeah, sure.
This is what presently exists there, and this is conceptually what you could do. Retail on the first floor, residential on the second. A beautiful landscaped area. You can incorporate the bike path, plenty of parking, literally walk across the street to get to the train. And so that's conceptually what you could do. And again, it's been a long night, so I'm going to try and be brief. We think financially, from the town's perspective, it's a win. We've done a very rudimentary property tax analysis. Presently, we've got a retail use in our building, pay approximately $11,000 a year in property taxes for both parcels. In this district, you can have up to 16 units as a matter of right. It's not as a matter of right, it's a special permit. You actually have greater density, but just making some conservative assumptions. If we put 16 residential units on this property, roughly 1,600 square feet each, they generate about $4,175 in taxes, about $66,800 in new property taxes. On the retail units, if you did 4 retail units, approximately 3,000 square feet, That's an additional $3,500 per unit, or $14,000. So you could essentially, it's an eightfold increase in property taxes from what's being presently paid versus what you could conceptually do out there. And again, I want to stress that we're not proposing anything here. This is just to be able to use your imagination to understand what you could achieve with a village business overlay. I know that there's been some concerns about displacing commercial uses in this portion of town. And I'll just take our property as an example. I mean, right now we have a retail use that's a permitted use in the commercial district. If we did something like this and you had 4 retail units, I mean, you broaden the retail base, you broaden the commercial base, and diversify it, at least on our property. So we don't think that this will result in a displacement of commercial property. And the last thing is that we have consulted with the Economic Development Committee, and Ms. Burbine is here. We presented this, and we had their support. They thought that this would be an economic benefit for the town. So we're asking you, the Selectmen, for your support, please, for the article.
Can I ask a question that's not unfortunately not related to this, but the parcel out back? Let's say John owned that property out back where the school buses are. Would he have to sign on board, I suppose like Bobby Drew did and the others, to have his parcel included in this overlay district?
Before proposing this, we consulted with all of the affected property owners.
Right.
And we received favorable responses.
But you didn't go out back.
Why didn't you do that
Because you probably
space?
couldn't get them on board. I know it's tied up in litigation and all that.
No, their parcel is in it, the
Yes,
Russos.
the Russo parcel.
It is?
Yes.
That's correct.
What's this back here?
I believe that's owned by the.
What are you pointing to?
This stuff.
Yeah.
Laura can tell.
Yeah, that's the.
Is that the pool?
What is that,
I believe
Laura?
it's open space owned by the.
All right, so it's, all right.
That's correct. That's not part of the Russo parcels as far as we know.
All right, Adam, I'm still confused.
So what is that?
So this square portion right here,
They dug a hole.
Right.
That's where they replicated the wetlands.
Yes.
okay?
So, see this parcel here, that's the medical office
Yeah,
building.
yeah, yeah,
These 2
okay.
parcels here.
But
are-
this side over there.
This parcel right here.
You're still talking about that too?
That's Mr. Drew's here,
Yeah.
Elder Garcia's here.
Yeah.
And then you've got.
So you're talking
over
about
here.
anything here in the squares?
Correct.
Both sides of the.
That's correct.
Of the old rail line?
That's correct.
What is this?
Okay. That's the school bus area down here. Okay.
That's
Why don't we
River,
do it
that's
C
River
also?
Run.
Right.
The river runs right there, you know.
Why aren't we doing this area too, then?
Right. I don't
Tony,
know.
which?
Why aren't we doing C? I mean, if we're,
Right, on that side, you've got condominium development here, and I'm trying to
But
recall
wait.
on this side.
when that group went in, we
Right.
allocated the
Very
lot,
James Landing.
Out front.
the
Very
lot in
similar to
front
that.
is an overlay district. You can do mixed use in that building, but they never did it.
That's correct, right, Laura?
Is that at
Tony's
James Landing?
correct.
It was discussed, yeah, and they.
No, it was
They were
voted
supposed to
that
put
way.
a,
They just did it in phases, and they never
never did.
built out.
Commercial building at the beginning of the Riverway.
right, they were gonna put a building there that had commercial use and then apartments or something up top, and they never did it.
That's right.
Is that where this C is?
No,
Uh,
that's where it's
where
not, that's
kind
the
of,
jagged lines.
zigzag line is,
That's where it
right
is.
next to the district that would be changed, that's where the commercial building is supposed to be.
So is this
C
the-
is,
is this- What's, I guess my question is, it looks like we're focusing this district on specific pieces of property.
Well, we are.
Instead of pieces of town. You know what I mean? Like, if we think that this should be a commercial area with an overlay district, then it seems more specific than I would think it may encompass, if we're really trying to develop that part of town. You know, why wouldn't you have the property 15 feet to the right of it, isn't it also?
No, I mean, at some point, the town may want to look into that. I mean, I should say that this idea was discussed shortly after the article was first proposed in 2006. And I think the intent was to take an incremental approach to see how it was going to work. And so we were sort of continuing on that path by proposing the next incremental path would be perfectly appropriate for a consideration.
I mean, I think
It
that's
gets more
where-
complicated, I should say, when you talk about the north side of New Driftway, it gets more complicated because then you have the MBTA properties there, getting closer to the residential neighborhoods.
But I understand your perspective. I mean, you really only care about your piece of property, which is what that's normal. But I think from your perspective, you should be looking at it more globally to say, well, if we're putting an article before the town, should it encompass more of an area than just the part that really they're interested in? So that's, I guess that's my question.
Well, first of all, I want to clarify, I'm here, I guess, representing the planning board, but who has to weigh in on this article because it was presented by petition. I didn't have anything to do.
So did you ever meet with them?
We're scheduled for a public hearing with the planning board on the 28th, I believe.
The 24th.
Can we wait until we hear what the planning board says before we have to vote?
I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I just think it could be I'd hate to go back to town meeting 2 or 3 times to finally do whatever Laura may think or the town may think this whole area of town should look like.
I think there are people in town who wanted to see the MBTA property included in case they ever did spin off part of the parking lot that's, not used very much.
That was my question. That was my question. And could we do that, Laura?
I think at this point, no, because I think we've had the same kind of situation before in town, the moderator or town council told us it's outside the 4 corners of the article when it gets to town meeting. We already advertised the public hearing.
No, I'm talking about, like I said, or like I had asked earlier, no, if, to Tony's point, if we wanted to include a larger area, and I just whispered to John, do those landowners have to be on board? Or can we just extend the overlay district, like Tony said, cover a bigger piece, a bigger section that might make more sense, maybe down, including James, and I'm just making up idea, James Landing, does landfills, transfer station, encompass a larger area? Do we have to have those landowners on board to do such a thing?
You don't. I mean, I think it's just a practical.
All right, okay.
I think it's too late to do it for this.
I agree. I was just, all right.
I mean, just in terms of our advertising deadlines
Mhm.
and all those kinds of things, but for the spring, you can certainly do it.
And just so you know, from our perspective, it would be impossible for us to be able to reach the.
Oh, no, it was.
I mean, we've had discussions about what else we could do to make this more attractive. It's simply, as you can imagine, impossible for us to get any traction with the T to talk about a zoning.
This is a town issue, not
Yes.
Rick, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, you're representing your client, and I understand where you're coming from. I'm all totally groovy with that, okay? But I'm not entirely on board without getting the input from the planning committee on this. I mean, they're the experts, they're looking out for the town, they know a heck of a lot more about this than I do. I always like to have the expert committees render their input before I vote on it. So I'm not gonna be able to vote on this, or I'll vote no tonight if we have to, just because for lack of benefit of input from them.
Well, before we go there, I've talked to Adam, and I will say that I think the concept's a really good idea. I mean, when you look at Driftway, New Driftway, and you find it is the gateway in, and it's the formal commercial industrial area that frankly is dwindling. This is something that we need to take a look at. I know that back in 2006 or 2005, former Chairman Fenton was there advocating for the overlay district with the planning board, and they did a good job. And I think it's a question of, maybe expanding it. I really do. But I'd certainly like to hear the town planner and the planning board's position on it. I think certainly when you look at the value of the land and the optimal use, this is an area that's going to yield that for residential because you're going to get those views for the ocean or the North River. So it begs the question, is this really where the overlay district should be? Because clearly in the past 6-7 years, there really hasn't been not much activity in the existing overlay district. So maybe it makes sense to kind of shift that residential component on this side because you're going to be able to do it. And clearly we've seen between Riverway and James Landing, that's where the development has gone for obvious reasons. And one thing I would certainly say, and I think this is important because I think it underscores what you're trying to do, is that we might need a bigger consensus here from the planning side because we don't want to get into spot zoning on issues and saying, well, this is a great idea, which it is, but then other people are going to come in and say, I've got a good idea over here and let's do that there and start doing this on a spot zoning concept. But I think down zoning this area is probably one thing that we really should think about doing. And I'd like to hear some feedback, and not on this project alone, but from the planning board, of saying this area, maybe even going further into the C zone, and saying, maybe this is just not what we want. In this location, it's too valuable an area for better uses than what presently exists.
Rick?
Yeah, just to follow up, I like the idea, but I don't have enough information, I'm not an expert, so I just want to get the other benefit from the other. And with all due respect to your current business, which I go to quite a lot, you know, that sort of thing is an aesthetic upgrade and would bring more people living there and, you know, foot traffic and all that sort of thing. So in principle, and I think in practice, I'm all on board, but there might be stuff out there I just don't know about. That's all I'm saying.
We're gonna meet on the 29th. Is that the end of the world if we, you know,
It's a good idea.
planning board meets on the 24th, Laura? Is
Of
that?
course, we're more than happy to come back.
Is that all right with you guys?
Of course, thank you.
Sorry to have
I don't,
to
you know.
No, that's
have
right.
your attorney's
Is it
fees
a
go up again for another
large
meeting, but.
agenda, Kim? I mean, maybe put it on early if that helps, earlier.
Yeah, that would be good.
That'll be good.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
all right. Thank you. Appreciate
And
it.
Adam, if you
Yes.
could, on the revised version of this, could you put a couple key building locations?
Sure.
Make it
Like,
easier.
I think we all know where the Dunkin' Donuts is. I think we all know where South Shore Auto Parts is, but just puts a couple dots as to where they are on this map.
We certainly
just
can
so
mark
that-
one.
You know what I mean?
for
Just so
you.
we can all look at.
Okay, this is the official zoning map exhibit.
Yeah, no, I
so
dig it.
That's what it's supposed to look like, but we're happy to give you some more landmarks.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Where I get my hazelnut coffee.
I think we've done all the articles, if I'm not mistaken, with the exception of 13, and we'll listen to that in 2 weeks. Is that correct, Kim? All right. Article 6 is a proclamation. It's United Nations Day on October 24th.
Yes.
Marty, would you mind?
Can I ask
reading
you-
that? John, go ahead.
Why are we doing this anyways?
do it
Procla-
every year.
Because, I know, but I'm just saying, just out of curiosity, why are we proclaiming UN Day? I mean, I'm happy to say it, but I just was going through it going, why? But,
Because we
I can't
can.
answer that.
A lot of different activities. I do know that once this is read into the record tonight and it's signed by the
Can I
Board of
borrow yours?
Selectmen,
I can't find it.
in Boston and all of these proclamations for all the different communities are posted in the State House. So.
I have no problems. I just thought to myself, it's
Ruth was just
dealing with
wondering
like
if you were
international
against it.
issues that. Why are we proclaiming United Nations Day 2013? That's my
There's a headline
point.
here, Ruth.
All right, I'll ask, Mr. Chair, I'd submit that the clerk should read it. How about that?
United Nations Day Proclamation 2013. The United Nations
In French.
in everyone's interest. Whereas the United Nations was founded in 1945 and the anniversary of the day on which the UN Charter came into force is observed each year on October 24th, and whereas the United Nations promotes peace and security, development, democracy, economic prosperity, global health, and human rights around the world and is vital now more than ever. And whereas the United Nations works to achieve the Millennium Development Goals by providing common development strategy for the international community, improving coordination, coherence, and effectiveness within the UN system, the donor community in developing countries, and whereas the goals address universal issues from poverty and access to education to improving healthcare and environmental sustainability and enjoy unprecedented political support because they are specific and measurable, with a deadline and indicators for monitoring progress attached to each goal. And whereas the United States has a long tradition of leading international efforts to improve health, education, and economic growth in developing countries, and has shown its commitment to the Millennium Development Goals through foreign assistance, progressive trade initiatives, and debt relief measures, and whereas a bipartisan poll conducted in April revealed that more than 8 out of 10 voters say it is important that the United States maintain an active role within the UN. And whereas the UNA, USA, and United Nations Foundation have declared the United Nations Partnerships for Global Progress as its theme for 2013 United Nations Day commemoration. Whereas the United Nations Association of Greater Boston is committed to educating and mobilizing our local communities to build a stronger network of global citizens and leaders to create a more prosperous, just, and sustainable world. Whereas the citizens of Scituate should participate in all activities related to UN Day, now therefore the Board of Selectmen officially proclaim October 24, 2013 as United Nations Day. In witness whereof we have set our hands and caused the seal of the town of Scituate to be affixed on this 15th day of October in the year 2013. Kathleen A. Curran, Town Clerk, and the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you, Marty.
John, is that a 4-to-1 vote, or?
I was waiting for all in support.
Thank you. I don't think it's necessary, but I'm sure we all support it. Agenda item number 7 is an adoption of the social media policy. It's Tricia has done this with the unions. I guess it's in our position to do it by voting this tonight for the non-union positions.
This applies to boards, committees, and non-union employees not covered by collective bargaining agreements. So it's appropriate that you adopt it, and as Sean said, we're bargaining with the unions, and some have, the contracts that settle already have it in place.
Any questions, anybody? If not, I'll accept a motion.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to adopt the Town of Scituate social media policy dated July 30th, 2013.
I have a motion and a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 8 is accept a resignation from the Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to accept the resignation of Karen McDonald from the Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee, and further that the Board thank Ms. McDonald for her years of service to the committee and the town.
Thank you, John, and a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Next is an appointment to that same committee.
Move the Board of Selectmen appoint Paul Fantasia as a full member of the Traffic Rules and Regulations Committee.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Paul was an associate, now he's a full member. Thank you. Agenda item number 10 is the week ahead, the report from the town administrator.
FEMA. Tomorrow is the deadline for the town's appeal, and we have someone driving to Falmouth to pick up the appeal from the Woods Hole Group and then drive it into Cambridge to be delivered. So hopefully there'll be someone there to accept it with
Well,
the federal government shutdown.
Can I interrupt you right there? I was just, Jim Cantwell, Jim Cantwell called me today. He personally delivered Marshfield's appeal to Paul Ford, and sat down and had a conversation with him. He's the acting regional administrator for FEMA. He got his timestamp today, and he said, other than that one, Scituate was the only other appeal. So I just wanted to throw that in. So hopefully we can see the same person and get it stamped.
I'll have to check on that now. You have me worried, because we're sending it to a different person, but.
All right. Well, this Paul Ford is aware of our first appeal.
I was
Right,
just thinking
yeah.
that they may have it wrong.
Well-
Tricia, not us.
All right.
No, I'm kidding.
Get a
I'm
couple
kidding.
copies.
So anyway, continue to have folks come in the building. We were contacted by Duxbury last week. I had an email from a city councilor in Winthrop on Sunday, asking about the town's process. I don't
A
know.
little late to the game, old Winthrop.
I don't know, because that's a different county, so I
They
think that's
weeks behind us,
Essex
is that-
County. Well, the Plymouth County were the first set of maps to roll out, is my understanding, although the Cape has them, so different areas are getting them at different times. But I did want to tell the board that we have 2 appeals, and they will both be in tomorrow. So update on that. The second thing, again, updating you on the varied facilities projects that are going on in town. We opened 2 sets of different bids last week. The first set of bids we opened were for feasibility and schematic design for the Gates School. I think there were almost a dozen responses to that. Those are going to be reviewed by the school building committee. Over the next, I think the meeting's this week or next week, and to select someone to do the schematic design work. And then last week, we also had the bid opening for feasibility and schematic design for the public safety building. And we had 11 bids for that, and those are all being reviewed by the Public Building Commission. Thursday night they'll start. So, and if we have a recommendation, then we'll be looking at moving forward on that. This piece of the work for the public safety building is $60,000. So, and then nothing to do on Gates. We're holding steady on Gates renovation right now. I think we have enough information to wait to see what happens with the the Gates Middle School feasibility before we spend any more money on that, before we really know what the recommendation is for a renovated or a new middle school. Because that is what, the feasibility is looking at 3 places, renovate in place, and this existing footprint here, and at the Ellis Estate for the school. So.
Say that again? I'm sorry. I
Is
was,
that this feasibility will look at 3 places. It's gonna look at, first and foremost, whether Gates can continue to be a school. That's its primary mission, and then also looking at feasibility for somewhere in this area or on the Ellis Estate. So those 3 options. And the public safety one is also looking at various options. And finally, a follow-up to our meeting last week about Minot Lighthouse, answer to some specific questions. I was in touch and had a few conversations with the town manager in Cohasset, and when the General Services Administration disposes of property through a bid or grant purpose, then state or local governments are next in the queue. So we are equally eligible with Cohasset, and then after that, it reverts to other private parties to do that. My response from the town manager in Cohasset was that they saw no overwhelming reason to pursue acquisition of Minot Light at this time, citing the insurance issues which we talked about last week. Also the ongoing maintenance he shared with me. I shared with him our insurance quote because they have the same carrier. He shared with me some detailed information that he would receive from the GSA in terms of maintaining the historical character of the building. Aside from maintenance, I mean, the building's never been painted, could not be painted, but any changes to the building have to run through the GSA as well. So,
Can I ask you a question? When you, let's say we don't decide to stay away. Cohasset does the same thing. They put it out to bid. Where, is that in Scituate or is it in Cohasset? And then could we tax it?
That's in Scituate.
the lighthouse
Okay, yeah,
sits in
right.
Scituate
That's what I thought.
waters.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Is it taxable?
If it's held by a private party, I think that's an interesting question. I think there may be a case for that.
I
If
can
they
see,
run a- if
I
they
can
run a
see
B&B.
someone spending, just to say they own it, I can see
Like
someone
an oil
spending $1
company
million.
or something.
No, but.
Good luck
I'm
trying to
serious,
establish a value.
I don't know.
Good
I mean,
views.
well, okay, if they spend $1 million for it, there's your value, right?
I did email the person we've been dealing with a question or two. I did not hear from her, but I think the deadline is imminent. But also that the application process is pretty extensive, but I don't have the date. And that's all I have.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to number 11, other business, correspondence. We do have some correspondence. If Marty, if you want to take a break, I'm sure John or
Yeah, let
someone
John do
pop
this one.
in. Yeah, John. There's a good one there on Pineview Drive, John.
Sure. Carol and Don Watt. How did I get to read this? That's what the clerk is.
You want to read this
Assistant,
one.
give me a title here. This is dated September 27th, 2013, and it's addressed to Mr. Bangert. I'm sure you get the complaints aplenty with some of the town projects, as in today's society, dissatisfaction and complaint seem to be a universal expression, even if undeserved. Given this, though, my wife and I are moved to tell you of our complete satisfaction with the preliminary work on the resurfacing project on Pineview Drive. We experienced work accomplished in an expedited, professional manner by all those who participated, beginning with the town on-site supervisor and continuing through all the workers on the site. Communication was excellent, and the storm sewer replacement completed with minimal disruption for all of us. We look forward to the final steps to give us a street of which we can be proud. It's been a long trip for a lot of us. We're ready. Excellent job and congratulations.
I kiddingly, made a joke about it a minute ago, but these are very nice to get. When people take the time to write a letter like this, it's nice.
Wicked good.
And thank you. Thank you very much. Then we have one other piece of correspondence.
This is from the Scituate Waterways Commission, dated September 10th, 2013, addressed to the Board of Selectmen from Richard Eckhouse, the chairman of the Waterways Commission. I love Rick Murray. Gentlemen, as a quick note of praise to all those involved in putting together the Scituate Touch a Boat Show this past July. There was a lot of planning and logistics completed by Harbor Master Patterson, Assistant Jill, and others in that office, as well as volunteers from the Scituate Historical Society and other groups. There were almost 300 attendees, many new to Scituate. Local craftsmen showed their works, and there were demonstrations on knot tying, sail making, and wood carving along the harbor tours using the harbor launches as well as a raffle. A good time was had by all. We discussed this success during a recent Scituate Waterways Commission monthly meeting, and I elected to write you folks to recommend that the town of Scituate keep this program for 2014 to make it a second annual. Sincerely, Richard Eckhouse.
Thank you. Other business, I'll start with Rick, if you would like.
Sure. We got a letter in our packet from State Senator Bob Hedlund, sort of reminding us all that the State Senate's going to be debating the new 5-year environmental bill, which also includes the governor's version of the bond bill for $120 million for seawalls and jetties and revetments, retaining walls, and so on and so forth. But there's another paragraph in here where he says, I'm asking that we send a prioritized list of any such Scituate project that could benefit from the state funding. And I know we're on top of this, but I wanted to ask Tricia.
I haven't seen it, so.
Okay. Do we have a rough idea as to the process that we're going to prioritize all this stuff on, or how are we going to move on this?
I
Oh,
I
okay.
can't speak to it, Rick, so.
All right, great.
I'll take a look at it.
Sure, here you go.
Thanks.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks, Tricia.
John, are you ready?
Yeah, I noticed in the mail we received from Timothy Cruz, the District Attorney for Plymouth County, that they have 2 upcoming seminars, one dealing with Plymouth County Safe School Conference, Managing Threatening Situations, for October 30th, which it would be nice if somebody from the school could maybe go, or police. But the one that really caught my eye was one that he and I discussed along with Sean during Chief Stewart's installation here about 2 weeks ago. And in particular, he was talking about a drug overdose prevention conference that they're holding in Brockton, Friday, October 25th, at the Shaw's Conference Center in Brockton. I looked at my calendar and I noticed that I have that day available, and I'm expecting to attend it. I think it's something very intriguing. I know that the police department, along with Chief Stewart, has been involved, extremely involved with a lot of drug prevention, and this is, I think, something that would be well to our service to attend, certainly from the chair, from the Board of Selectmen. So that's the second thing, or first thing. And the last thing I was going to mention is that the decision from the Zoning Board of Appeals has been rendered with respect to the cell tower, and it was approved at the location on Tilden. One thing that came to light was that in their decision they had deferred to the Historical Commission with respect to what type of tower, whether it would be a regular tower or whether it would be a flagpole. And the Historical Commission, I guess my understanding is that they would have preferred, or would prefer, a flagpole. So it looks as though that if AT&T goes forward with that project, that's what we will probably see. So it'll be a beacon, if you will, or a landmark for people to see out at sea, a nice American flag.
Tony?
A few things. First thing, I just wanted to talk about we met with Hummerock, the
Civic
Association. Yeah, the 2 associations that are in Hummerock last week, and I think the meeting went very well. That all 5 of us were there. A representation from the police, the fire, and DPW, and the town administrator. And I think it was a very good meeting. A lot of informational stuff going back and forth, but I think it's probably going to be one of a series of future meetings, but I thought that was productive. Other thing I wanted to mention, I got a phone call back a couple weeks later from the Plymouth County pension people. I called them before they had the vote on the thing. He called me back a couple weeks after it, and
good timing.
Yeah. And had a good conversation. One thing that was interesting about it is he said he's more than willing to come in here and explain things to us and give us our actuarial tables and show us some stuff. So you know, at some point in time, it may make sense for us to dive into this a little bit deeper so that we understand a little bit better, because some of the numbers he was throwing out in the conversation just didn't make sense to me. So that's something to think about for future, you know, future meetings or what have you. I don't know, did we talk about first night, or did that happen in between the last two?
I don't think we've
We didn't-
never had a meeting.
I know I think I saw some of you out there, but it was a great, huge turnout. The weather was great. Actually, Rick, I saw you behind CVS over there.
Saw you.
Getting pizza.
Saw you.
But it was a great, biggest I've seen yet. The parking lots were packed. The merchants were all open, and it was really, really a good event. And that's what it's all about, seeing all the people out there shopping and you know, enjoying that night. So that's a big success in town. One other thing I just want to mention quickly, and we talked about this when we were doing the police chief investigations. I read an article in the paper this weekend, and I can't remember the school exactly, but they were saying how they were increasing their student resource officers from 2 to 4, and what a huge impact that's having in the towns. And then I look at what we're doing now, and we don't quite have any yet. We're kind of trying, maybe looking at the DARE program and seeing how that implements. But, you know, what we should do is start looking into some of these other communities and how successful those are. And I think we're really on the right trail in terms of us looking to that strong. I know Trish and Chief Stewart have been talking about it, and we talked about it in that search. But I was amazed that this community had 4.
Yep, it's ready to go, and the chief met with the superintendent last week, and we're doing a MOA for sharing, and I think there'll definitely be some changes, and that was one of the goals for the new chief, so
I think that's
you're right,
great.
yeah.
I think it's great. And the last thing, quick sports update, and again, I only talk about the ones I know or my kids play on, so there's other sports.
No bias there.
Great football game Friday night, weather was good. Scituate beat Hanover in a close one, and they are undefeated in their conference. They
How'd your kid do?
He didn't play that one. I'll get to him in a minute. But they play this Friday night again. Go and watch it. Great turnout. If the weather's great, there's hundreds and hundreds of people there. It's really a good take. Scituate girls soccer team is ranked in the top 20 in eastern Massachusetts. They're like 12-0-1 or 12-1-1. They're having a great season. And the Scituate golf team, which my son does play on, finished their season today, and they went 11-4-1. So they had a great season also. And I think many of the other teams are doing great too, but those are the ones I know about. So go out and watch them. They're a lot of fun.
That it?
That's it.
Marty?
Yep. Tony already touched on First Friday, but it was packed. Every store that we went into was jammed. But then also on Saturday was Fall for Scituate, which was excellent. The entertainment was great. I had never been to the event before, and they had a chili contest, and they also had a chowder contest. And Mr. Dooley's from Cohasset won the chili contest with a prime rib chili, and soon to be open galley. Hopefully, he says the end of this month, they won the chowder contest. But it was a great take. It was nice.
Did you get to sample them?
I did.
Did you?
It was awesome. It was
Were you
excellent.
a judge?
No, I wasn't a judge. No.
Great. Super. Is that it?
That's it.
Along those lines, John and Marty, will Front Street merchants be doing what they do every Halloween?
As far as I know,
it's
yes.
actually, it's the
I know we
chamber
meet-
and the
all
merchants.
right, I
It's
know
a
they meet-
combination
we
of
meet
both. But
one.
yes, they are. It's going to be starting, I believe, at 4 o'clock. I think the merchants have put out 4 to 5.
Right.
To be candid, usually it's till about 5:30, till they run out of candy. It's really what it is.
Ruth,
Yeah, and
if you have a sec, could you put that in your paper somewhere? That is, when my children were little, and these guys are in the thick of it right now, I'll tell you, it's huge. It's
Halloween
great.
in the
You
harbor.
know,
People go downtown, trick or treat.
I thought you knew, but,
I think we made a press release, I think I gave us a press release, last year.
okay. If you could do something again, we're gonna meet again, but until you go, you don't really understand what the merchants do for the kids. And
people wanna
and then-
know.
And then the kids think they're worn out after that, so it's kinda neat, you know? So,
Sugared up, though, I might
yeah,
add.
right.
Bouncing off.
Well, that's all I have. We have other business, we
Move the
have
Board of
correspondence,
Selectmen-
minutes.
Move the Board of Selectmen vote to accept regular session minutes, May 21st, 2013, October 1,
And I have
2013.
a motion and a second.
Second.
A second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And finally, number 12 is to adjourn after we sign documents.
So moved.
And a second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 That will do it.
job, Sean.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, folks.